All right. With it being 6:30, I call this February 26th meeting of the Planning Board to order. My name is Chris LaValle. I'm the vice chair. I will be leading tonight's meeting. Deirdre should be on Zoom. She is on Zoom tonight. The rest of the board is present. All meetings are televised live and are available on demand by Chelmsford Telemedia. This meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy using Zoom, but that option for remote attendance and participation is being provided as a courtesy. And if we do have problems with Zoom and it goes down, we will try and get things going again. But if not, we will not be suspending the meeting. We will be moving forward. So, tonight we have, first on the agenda is public input. So if anyone from the public would like to have any comments or input that are not related to the subject of a current public hearing before the planning board, but are related to our jurisdiction, we'd be more than willing to hear your comments. Anyone on Zoom?
No.
Okay. With there being none, we'll move on to the first public discussion, Kate's Corner neighborhood. This is a continuation of the discussion with the neighborhood regarding the areas in Kate's Corner and the zoning conflicts in that area. There were two emails that were attached to the agenda. One was the initial email from Lockheed Martin, and the second is a follow-up. And so I will open it up at this time to Evan, if there are any additional items or comments.
I don't have any at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any board members? Have any comments, suggestions, items to discuss before I open it up to the public?
Yeah, I'll make a couple of comments. So I went through and I looked up the different uses for CA, CB, and IA, just to try to get a better appreciation of what the differences are. And so I put them in some slides, and there they are. I was a little bit, I think you normally expect that going from CA to CB to IA, there'd be an increasing intensity of use. But what I was actually a little bit surprised to see is that CB has things that CA and IA do not have. But anyway, I'll just go through what I did. So what is allowed in CA and CB but not IA is a pretty short list. It's boarding house, retail stores is probably the one that most people think of. And then also massage service establishment. So those are things that are allowed in CA and CB, but not IA. What's allowed in CB and IA, so if you're looking now to the more intensive use you would expect, but not CA, then there's a whole bunch of things. Light manufacturing, that's one that we've talked about, but also warehouse, research and development, outdoor contractor's yard, which we're all aware of from a recent application there. Access to private way to IA uses. I think that's important because we're talking about currently the area that is what was Maxwell's. It is zoned CB, and one of the things that CB can provide is access to a private way to IA uses, which is what's right next door, and then parking, garage, and structure, and then there's a whole bunch of other things like funeral home, so forth and so on. So going to a CB and IA, there is a lot more uses there than you would get with just the CA. So what's allowed in CB but not in CA or IA, this was the one that was interesting, was motor vehicle uses, and this was brought up in the application that was before us before. Somebody said, hey, you could have car sales there. And so also restaurant, bank or financial agency, club or lodge, or body art. So I think, for example, if we're considering going from CB to something lower than CB, or if we're considering something like a light IA for that, I think there's certain uses that we want to keep in mind that are allowed by CB that we may not necessarily want to continue to be allowed to be there. And then the last one is So what's allowed in IA but not CA or CB? And now you have things like municipal garages, cemetery, non-exempt, and earth removal wood operation, and distribution centers, small and medium distribution centers are allowed in IA but not in CA or CB. And so this is another case where, as we're considering this, what kinds of uses are we thinking about I would not want to have there necessarily in a light IA kind of consideration. Is that the last one?
Yes.
Okay. So originally, when we were thinking through this, I was thinking, okay, I think that the area that is currently, I mean, what we're striving to do here is to reduce the zoning conflict, right? That was our original goal. So in particular, we're focused on the former Maxwell property because that is what exists between an existing IA and residential. And so that one in particular, I think we're focusing on. And we were considering how would we go from CB to something else. And sort of in at least looking through these things, my conclusion is we had talked about a light IA or something like that. I think that it's difficult. I'm not even sure I would call it light IA. I think what we want to really do is I think what we want to consider is a new zoning district, one that is, we originally were sort of identifying as a light IA, but I think what we want to identify it as basically what would be a transition zone between residential and something that's like IA or a light IA, that sort of thing, that we might then incorporate light IA under. And so I think that I think if we're going to do that, I think we want to carefully consider what are the different uses that are allowed and not allowed in each of these zones in fashioning that district, and that would enable people to still make good use of their properties and so forth. But I think in general, at a minimum, I would think that we would want to, the current backyards of residences that are zoned CB right now, I think we definitely would all agree that that should not continue as CB. The current Maxwell property, which is designated CB, I think we want to make something less intensive than the uses that are allowed by CB, but would be a good transition to IA. And then on the roadside, the 27 side, we have a CA and a CB, and exactly what we want to do there, I don't know. But nonetheless, that's a little bit more appropriate for those kinds of uses because it's not abutting residential directly. It's abutting a fairly major road. And so I'm not providing solutions. I'm just identifying, I think, the parameters of what we want to do is to look to reduce the zoning conflict, likely come up with a new zoning district, and especially one that's targeted towards transitioning from residential to the IA use. And those are the thoughts that I had.
Anyone else?
Nice job.
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely.
I would only add two other goals. In addition to reducing conflict, I would also add that we're trying to protect the residents of the area and also not hand tie the current property owners. Right. So I think those three goals together would kind of guide us in that way. All right. Any other comments before we get resident?
I have a couple.
Yep.
I'm wondering, looking at that map, we have a lot of areas in town that are patchwork like that. But I mean, I wonder if people have thoughts on, should part of this exercise be making the general area more uniform? I mean, so we don't have CA, CB, IA all in a row. I don't know. And I guess I was kind of thinking along the lines of what Joel was, of looking for uses that we would want in this area and maybe calling it IB, like we have CA and CB and anyway, I was thinking IB, and that this might be a zoning class that we might want to rezone a number of, other properties in town where we have similar goals, potentially for redevelopment or reducing conflict.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that this could be a good test case and pilot area for that type of transition zone.
Especially where you have like, it'd be nice if whatever we do for this zone, we can then apply it to areas in town that you go from a neighborhood, then this IB or whatever, IA light, and then you go into IA, right? So you have that transition, so what it kind of like, when you look at like all our A zones, they have a buffer of this lighter version, right? Because those are the ones that directly would abut a neighborhood. And it gives us a little bit more flexibility than in zoning IA, more industrial versus always having to worry about the neighbors, those properties that.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts? Okay. I'll now open it up to public for thoughts and comments. If anyone wishes to speak.
Hi, everybody. So good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Pittman. I am the general manager for the Lockheed Martin Chelmsford location on 16 Maple Road. I appreciate your time. As a relatively smaller site with a big company name, I often find that people aren't very familiar with the work that we do in our area. So I want to just give a brief overview. We specialize in science and technology with a specific focus on engineering research and development and light manufacturing of microelectronics. So I think the board has mentioned clean tech, pretty akin to what we do. Our site has been part of the community for over 50 years. And we do take pride in operating both discreetly and respectful of our neighbors and of the charm that we've come to enjoy as well. We also recognize that our neighbors are not just residents, but they're also the local church, Kate's Corner, Byam Elementary School. So I just wanted to reinforce, because of our long history here, maintaining how we operate today is also important to us and for our employees who have a very strong connection to that location. I am certainly no expert in zoning. I don't know much about the legalities of it, but the feedback from the January Planning Board was insightful to me to ensure that we maintain that standard. We've been at 16 Maple for over 50 years, and we look forward to being there for another 50 years. I'd like to offer commentary on two aspects of the zoning considerations. Firstly, as you can kind of see on the chart, our existing property, as you brought up, is on 16 Maple Road, is currently split between two zones, IA and CA. So even without the discussions of growth or expansions, we understand the implications of rezoning need to be discussed, and we too would like to be part of the solution to help simplify the zoning for 16 Maple Road, not just in whatever form it looks like, not just to maintain how we operate, but to provide the stability for the neighbors, as well as offer the town streamlining solutions for zoning regulations. Secondly, I would like to acknowledge our interest in the 24 Maple Road. So in the past, when we do consider growth opportunities for our location, we have considered supplementary satellite locations in nearby towns or adjacent areas. But the availability of 24 Maple Road adjacent to our property presents a unique opportunity for us to expand at our core site and remain part of the community. To be clear, we're not looking to double the size of our operation and grow tremendously, but rather just create some extra space to operate more efficiently for our customers in the same manner that our neighbors and residents have come to expect how we operate today. As you can see from the visual there, the lot itself, even with different zoning to work through, is unique in size and shape. So some of our proposed solutions would even be naturally limited in what we can offer. The most immediate need that we're thinking through is parking solutions or possibly just using a modified use of the existing structure. Now, it's important to share that we're still working our internal review process related to the 24 Maple Road, and it's still ongoing internally. Our teams are working very expeditiously to solidify that interest before the April timeframe. But I do want to acknowledge, I recognize the dilemma in considering changing the zoning of 24 Maple Road can seem premature in advance of a definitive agreement to purchase or even lease the property, especially with the concerns that we've heard in public input. At the same time, as you mentioned, because our existing lot already exists on 2 different zones, introducing a third new zone from our standpoint does add complexity to the business case as well as the options that we can consider. So in full transparency, we are open to options that allow us to consider for a win-win-win solution in whatever that looks like. So just wanted to share my thoughts on that. As we continue to engage this opportunity, we're going to continue to be very transparent and public and open, taking into account the current future zoning regulations, taking into account neighborhood feedback, as well as following all permit and approval processes. So I just wanted to say I do appreciate the support and the feedback in the recent weeks, not only from our residents, our neighbors, our abutters, but from the town planning board and the town manager as this is solidified in topic. So thanks for your attention. I would like to introduce with me today Ann Sobolowski with the firm Price, Lobel and Ty, who has a little more technical experience in zoning and regulation, and she can provide a little more technical insight from our perspective as we're navigating through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As Anthony said, I'm Ann Sobolewski. I've been looking at the zoning with respect to these parcels. And just for discussion purposes, I mean, when you look at the map that we generated, you can see within the boundaries of Maple, Route 27, and Pond and Parkerville, that totals 25 acres, including the purely residentially zoned property. And then of that property, 20% is wetland. So 20% is undevelopable as resource areas, and then whatever areas border that would be undevelopable as well. Of that 25 acres, 25% are parcels owned by the town, so those would not be redeveloped. And then if you take out the residential properties, the 24 Maple Street property is 1.9 acres and is a very unique shape. Lockheed's parcels together total 6.9 acres. So that's the total area that could be used for Lockheed's purposes. And if you're considering, what could happen in the future long term, obviously Lockheed wants to stay there long term. But all in all, that parcel size, if they were ever to leave and someone were to come in, it is not a 20-acre parcel in and of itself. It's only 6.9 acres, as the Maxwell's is only 1.9. And that constrains what kinds of future development could occur on that parcel because of its size. You can't have a 75,000 square foot distribution center there under the current zoning as it is, and you would be limited in what size distribution center, if that is a fear, you would be able to put on a parcel that size in the first place. So additionally, there's a number of uses that Lockheed is making of its parcel that have not been controversial or caused problems. As Anthony said, they do research and development, they do manufacturing, light manufacturing, and there is office space involved. One of the things that would be of interest for the Maxwell's property would be to continue those kinds of uses, but again, that's constrained by the site. And I would suggest that if you do decide to eliminate the CB zone in the rear of those abutting parcels, that you also take into consideration what effect setbacks from residential districts that's elsewhere in your zoning would have, because as you can see, that Maxwell's parcel is very, very narrow. So if you rezone all of those backyards to make it residential, and then you have the setback requirements for the Maxwell's parcel be what they would be in residential, because it abuts residential, you would be extremely limiting what someone could do on that site from a dimensional perspective without getting a dimensional variance. I don't know if that's... With respect to that parcel, again, as Anthony said, in a perfect world, I would be able to come here and tell you we had this parcel under agreement and we have a proposal and we would like to get into a cooperative zoning discussion to limit what could be done on that site. But I can't say that we have that because we're still working on it. But we would very much like to work cooperatively with the board if we are able to put this parcel under agreement to come up with a zoning proposal that addresses what Lockheed would like to do with the parcel and also addresses the concerns of the neighborhood, because at base, they've been a good neighbor and they want to continue being a good neighbor, and I don't think that any proposed uses they would make on that site would be detrimental or offensive. They're not talking about adding 2,000 jobs. It's a much more discrete potential expansion of their use. Any questions? Thank you.
Nancy Arroway, 65 Littleton Road. I'd like to commend Joel on the comparison charts. They're very, very useful for the purpose of evaluating zoning options. I'd like to also suggest that you add to those comparisons the impacts of CEIOD. In particular, it's going to affect the ability to put multifamily housing in the commercial but not industrial. So unless you're under Bayard on Route 129, the CEIOD will not permit multifamily and industrial, but it does in all the commercials. So it's a consideration that should be looked at. Thank you.
My name is Bob Laporte. I live at 38 Parkerville Road, and basically our family has lived at 38 Parkerville Road since the late 1930s, and I grew up in that area, so I'm familiar with the land use changes that have taken place along Parkerville Road. So in preparation for tonight, I went through the town's master plan, and I think the proposal on changing some of the zoning and maybe creating another industrial district that is lower intensity has some bearing. And because when you look at the vision plan for the town's master plan, they talk about ensuring that the town is safe and attractive and community character is preserved. There are 6 or 7 industrial nodes in Chelmsford, and clearly Maple Street is not in one of those industrial nodes. You know, those nodes are really set up by highway access, and that creates a greater industrial use. So in growing up on Parkerville Road, I will just say that traffic on Parkerville Road has increased exponentially. And I think residents on Parkerville Road have a real concern about traffic impacts with any kind of development, whether it be on the Maxwell property or other properties. Parkerville Road is basically a rural town road after you get past the cemetery, and it's used as the way to get to Interstate 495. So it does receive a lot of traffic and school traffic. On page 6, the master plan states that they talk about 7 goals, and one is land use and zoning, manage and direct growth, including redevelopment and new development projects, in a manner that is consistent with the community's character, and ensure that the town's zoning and land use policies and practices are consistent with the approved master plan. So in listening to what you presented tonight on possible changes, it struck me that, especially in the Maxwell property, that maybe a new industrial zoning district is appropriate for that property. There is that question about setbacks in a residential neighborhood if those properties were, instead of split zoned, entirely zoned residential. But, what the town doesn't seem to have is a design review control. And I think, speaking as a resident, I'd be concerned with design review control and intensity regulations that affect this new zoning district. In other words, what are they going to put up? What is it going to look like? Is it appropriate for that transitional zone to the residential uses? And is it really appropriate for this little micro area that is the former Agway store? And with regard to the intensity regulations, especially in this particular site, because that long, narrow strip, really limits the feasible development that can take place on it. It seems to me that this potentially new zoning district, if it were to have the right controls, maybe there can be an appropriate use, industrial use on that site. But I think, again, this design review control, having been a member of the Historic District Commission, and I know that scares a lot of people about design review control, but, I think for a lot of us here, Lockheed has been a good neighbor, and the design of the facility is fine. But I think on this particular site, it's appropriate to have some sort of design review control, especially if it's going to be applied to other comparable neighborhoods, so that the planning board can look at site plan and they can look at what's going up, and is it really appropriate for this transitional area that we have here on Maple Street? Keeping in light of, there's going to be traffic problems that will occur, especially at Kate's Corner. So I think, and the other concern I have is we have Hot Pond. I'm a member of the Hot Pond Association, and, the town and the association has been battling with water quality on the pond. And so that is another concern I think we all have. It abuts a recreational beach, and the quality of water in the pond has to be of some concern for this particular Agway property. But I think it sounds like the potential of maybe creating a new zoning district that deals more appropriately with the issues on these transitional neighborhoods. And I would say including some design review control and changing the intensity requirements would go a long way to solving a reuse problem with this particular property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to mention I do want to clarify that the planning board does have design review control, and we do exercise that to the extent we can. We are limited by the bylaws that are currently in place for each of the zones. So I think having a new zone with some of that design built in as we're thinking about it, to give us more flexibility and more guidance for that specific type of zone would be helpful. One of the challenges I know that the board has faced in the past is with IA districts, we have very limited control, especially as it abuts some residential areas. And so we're limited in how much control we can apply to those areas. Creating this new transitional district would kind of help us with that conundrum that we often face.
Yeah. So being on the Historic District Commission for many years, we face this whole thing with design review control, but, without that, neighborhood properties run the risk of lowering in value. I mean, it's just the reality where you get these transitional zones that this is going to be a potential negative impact on the residential property. So I think careful review needs to be done. Lockheed has been a good neighbor. I always worry about the next generation because we've seen, some industrial buildings recently torn down, there's new owners and new things happen. So I think, notwithstanding Lockheed has been a good neighbor, I worry about the second generation owner going forward too.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Vivian Merrill, 23 Maple Road. I just have a quick question. If you rezone 24 Maple Road with this light industrial area, what happens to all the little backyard parcels next door to it? Do they become part of that same zone, or do they stay CB?
We would have to figure that out. Given the presentation that Joel gave, my preference would be probably to figure out how we can bring those back into residential zone and then figure out the setback issue on this new transitional zone.
Okay. I'm just thinking you might get a little pushback from the gentleman that lives at 8 Parkerville, because he is actively running a business out of his house, and that CB zone is very important to him. So, I don't know. All right, that was all.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Pam Byam Brevard. I live at 49 First Lane. And I apologize for being late. I know your website said you started at 6:30, but last February it said that, and I called and they said no, 7. You always start at 7, so I missed the presentation. But just to bring me up to, is this the latest proposal, or is this what it is now?
This is what it is now.
Okay.
And the slides that Joel went over was just comparing the different zones and their uses.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to be a little wordy, but I'll talk fast. I'll try to talk fast. I want to paint a picture for you, and while I'm painting the picture, as you get it in your mind, I want you to be thinking, does this sound like a great place to expand industrial development? So in that area that you're talking about, there are certain very important historical buildings. One is the Hildreth Robbins Byam Farm, built in 1740, surrounded by conservation land and beautifully restored by Joe and Bob Morse. It is a beautiful colonial home and setting. There's Kate's Corner, built in 1824, and in continual use as a store, a post office, and really the heart of our village. At one time, Ezekiel Byam, the first manufacturer of sulfur matches, sold his matches from that building. There's the First Baptist Church, built in 1771, home of the first female Baptist deaconess, Grace Hutchins Byam. There's the Hart Pond Cemetery, a pre-revolutionary burial grounds, described by the town's website as quiet, scenic, peaceful. There's the Byam School in the apple orchard of my great-grandfather at the Hildreth Robbins Byam Farm, an elementary school. There's the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, going right between Lockheed and what was Maxwell's, where people get to see beautiful woodlands, historic buildings on their way to the town center. There's Liberty Hall, built in 1881 as for meetings and social gatherings of the people of South Chelmsford, who were dedicated to improving, beautifying, and ornamenting, their words, their village. That pride in the village is still alive and well among our citizens in South Chelmsford. And last but certainly not least, there is Hart Pond, a 94-acre piece of Massachusetts Great Pond, used by the town continually in their ads and publicity as a sign of how beautiful and inviting Chelmsford is to its citizens. My concern primarily is not really the character of that area, although I enjoy it and I hope it's protected, but I'm primarily protective of the pond. This whole area that you're talking about is part of the watershed of the pond. That means that all of its land and every material that lands on its land drains into the pond eventually. It's a bowl-like structure where all the pieces of land you're talking about are on the rim of the bowl, and it goes down into the pond. A very important point is that no one in the town is responsible for protecting that watershed. So if you are thinking, oh, that's conservation's jurisdiction, they'll take care of it, we don't have to worry about it, that is not true. Conservation takes care of the first 100 feet off the waterway, and the rest is unprotected. Most of the watershed is in Westford, but this part is in Chelmsford. We need help. This is the only venue where we get to protect the watershed by coming and arguing about what goes into the watershed to begin with. My concern is an increase in pavement, parking areas. We're not just talking about Maxwell's. We're talking about the whole area being designated as industrial, is my understanding. There are several studies that will clarify my concerns in that area. In 2016, the Hydrological Science Journal issued a study that showed that runoff from paved areas contribute heavy metals, sodium, nitrate, phosphorus, litter, rubber residue, synthetic chemicals, pesticides, and pharmacologicals into the land around it. They showed that it impacts that rainfall, how it's captured, stored, and released. Parking lots are engineered for maximal runoffs from the surface, of course. You want the runoff quickly by the shortest path, and that alters the topography of the area. In 2018, December 12th, the Department of Biosystems Engineering and Soil Science of the University of Tennessee published that imperviousness alters the natural hydrology of a watershed by decreasing infiltration into the soil and increasing runoff and flow rates, leading to increased stream sediment loads. They added imperviousness negatively affects water quality by adding debris, salts, fertilizers, vehicle-based pollutants such as brake and tire dust, petroleum-based fluids. So the pond, we've heard, we fight hard for that pond. We reclaimed it. It was filled with weeds in 2005. We've worked since to reclaim it. And right now, the biggest problem is algae blooms. The biggest impact causing algae blooms are nitrogen and phosphorus and chemicals. And I got thinking, well, is there phosphorus in asphalt? I never heard of phosphorus in asphalt. I don't think there is. But the Engineering, Science, and Technology Journal wrote about phosphorus slag, it's called. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. but it's a yellow phosphorus industry byproduct. And it is used increasingly so as an additive for asphalt pavement. That adds the phosphorus we're fearing for the pond, and also it increases the heavy metal load into the water. D. Also, the Scientia Educare 1/3/25 published about algae. The deforestation and land development reduce the ability of the ecosystems to naturally filter out the nutrients that spawn the algae growth. So, yes, asphalt can have phosphorus. And again, I ask you, who would monitor that? Conservation does not look at the asphalt putting down. As far as I know, I can ask Dave Kuntz, but as far as I know, he does not review what is the makeup of the asphalt laid down. I don't know anybody who does that, and yet it is such a danger to our environment and our precious natural resource. And again, we're not just talking about Maxwell's. If you change the zoning, we're talking about that whole area. And I don't care how clean the industry is, they're going to have a parking lot for their employees. And I think one of the plans for Lockheed is to use the Maxwell's as a parking lot. Part of it is a parking lot, and I don't know if you may correct me. Okay. Other concerns I have, I like Maxwell's as a family. They're nice people. I wish them the best. But we can't get lost weighing what might be profitable for one family as opposed to the impact it leaves for the rest of us for time and perpetuity. In 1963, a cousin of mine, Alta Byam, sold her whole field, beautiful field, that the family wanted her to donate to the town as a park. But she sold it to Frequency Resources. Today, that is the home of Lockheed. So where I act now out of a sincere concern for the health of Hart Pond, it may be out of a little bit of family guilt. But it is an example of one person's profit versus a lifetime detriment to the rest of us. Another concern I have, well, let me just say that later. I'm in pushback, a little bit of pushback or argument or a different point of view against my concerns was someone said to me, well, Maxwell's already has a parking lot, so it's already there. My answer might be, just because we made a mistake that's detrimental, it doesn't mean we have to stay with that mistake. We can correct that now. We can get rid of that parking. Also, Maxwell that is not all paved, that whole area, just around the building. The rest is natural. Another argument against my concerns might be, if you make that residential, well, there's runoff, you have driveways, you have roofs to contend with. You know, it's just as bad. However, in the multidisciplinary Digital Publishing Institute from the University of Tennessee in 2018, they published a study that said that vehicle, service, and parking areas had relatively high levels of suspended solids, metals, and hydrocarbons compared to landscaped areas. I'm not naive. Landscaped areas and lawns with the phosphorus fertilizers are very dangerous to the pond. But we can change our behavior in that area. Hart Pond Association the last 2 years has had taken the initiative at their own expense of sending out notices to every single person in their watershed area, Chelmsford and Westford, notifying them of the damage that phosphates can do to the water and offering them alternatives. Other fertilizers that don't have the phosphorus in it.
Ms. Byam, could I ask you to wrap up, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Another question I had is public input versus corporate interests. In February, we had a good turnout, and it was very apparent, I don't think anybody would argue with me, that the resounding desire for the neighborhood was to turn it back to residential, or in the very least, neighborhood-friendly commercial. My final comment is, I don't understand. The town is now paying for the health of the pond. So to create a situation that probably will cause a further damage to the pond and require further mitigation that we're going to have to pay for doesn't make sense to me. Thank you very much for listening. Sorry about the voice, and I'm very sorry I was late.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Okay, I'm going to send it around the board one more time quickly to give any last-minute closing thoughts before we talk about next steps. Mike?
No.
Okay. John?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Anita?
Just so my understanding, we've got a couple of properties there that are on Route 27 that are owned by the town.
Yep.
Those we're considering changing them to town-owned, right? Like
Probably,
right,
yeah.
Right, that would make sense. So those are the two on 27, and there's one on Pond, right?
Yep.
Those three. Okay. Then we're looking at, and I've got them. So I'm really my glasses. That
My thinking is the rest of it's kind of up in
Right.
the air, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
So then we have the two parcels on 27 that abut town property. That's a residential home, correct, right now? If I'm not mistaken. And then we have the residential owners on,
Parkerville.
thank you, I couldn't read it, Parkerville,
Yep.
that are half CB and half RB.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we don't want to touch Kate's Corner, or do we? Does CA make sense for that? I'm just trying to understand what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Always got to clean up that CA that's part of Lockheed Martin.
Right, then we've got Lockheed Martin's parking lot, which is CA. Then we've got the building, which is IA. And then we've got Maxwell's, which is CB,
And then we got the residential areas.
residential areas.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think something, like I was just kind of looking at our use chart, and putting together something that would allow for, because right now under CB, Maxwell's could put an office building, right? I mean, like, right now, CB, you can put an office building, I'm
Yep.
not mistaken. Yeah, I mean, I would lean to maybe proposing, like, looking at this IA light and being very specific of what we want.
Okay. Thanks. Mike?
I'm not going to add to Anita. She summarized it really well. I think it was good, though, tonight to hear from Mrs. Byam on how that IA got
Got there.
created.
Yeah.
So that added a piece to the pie, because we didn't know how that got created. But I think now it's starting to come together and why we got so many little zones here, from the history. So it's kind of good to hear. So thank you.
Joel?
Yeah, actually, I have a question for Evan with regards to the setbacks and CB and the fact that the residential properties which are split between RB and CB. So, not considering Sayod for a minute, if in fact those residential properties were RB all the way up to the property line of CB, does that affect the setbacks on CB because they're directly abutting residential? But in this case where are they considered abutting residential or not abutting residential because their lots are kind of split between RB and CB?
Yeah, so this gets into the weeds of zoning, but we have in our underlying zoning and within the COID, we have a provision where the setback is increased to 100 feet where abutting a residential used or zoned property. And that's applicable within IA zoning, within the underlying and the COID.
Right.
So then you're saying that because those are currently being used, the setback doesn't change?
So,
That's what I heard. I'm like,
you can, the cautionary tale is, while it's good to view this as a pilot that can be applied to other areas in town, using 24 Maple for anything to apply to other parts of town, particularly when it comes to dimensional, is not a good exercise. Because it's a odd shape, and it's only 1.9 acres. And then you need to remember that regardless of what the outcome is, if your dimensional requirements are overly prescriptive, trying to prescribe an intended outcome that's very predictable, the existing conditions on the ground are likely going to be the starting point for a redevelopment project. What I mean by that is the existing footprint of the building, having a non-compliant side yard setback. The developer is likely going to come in and say, well, your new zoning requires 25-foot setbacks. However, I have an existing structure here. I'm pre-existing non-conforming. I'm proposing to demolish the existing structure and build it on the same footprint. So I think you need to keep that kind of in mind when you're trying to balance something that's overly prescriptive, which never works. And I would encourage you to embrace the flexibility of COID. Maybe you tighten it up, maybe you customize it for this new industrial district. But that's going to be the challenge here. The use exercise is fairly straightforward. But I think unfortunately, 24 Maple, in its current state, it's very odd shape. Going to be difficult to kind of apply that to other areas in town.
Okay.
And then just final comment, yeah, the 100-foot setback, again, it applies to existing industrial. You could apply it to your new industrial. But in practicality, it's really not applicable. It would have been applicable for Davis at Riverneck, entirely new development. But for something like this and other properties where you're trying to address these neighborhood conflicts, most developers are going to come in leveraging existing conditions.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Joel?
So just off the top of your head, then, what are your thoughts about to what degree we limit the residences that have the CB, that are partly zoned CB? And I mean, obviously, this is of interest to us because we have another area in town that we're very familiar with that's zoned IA but has residences. So,
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to know the history as to why these residential lots are split zoned. The notion that they're split zoned simply to accommodate a 100-foot offset seems unlikely to me. It seems too coincidental. But it'd be good to know the history of that, and we can look at some historical documents to figure that out. My suggestion is ideally the backyards of those single families would be zoned to residential, clean it up. But in doing so, whether it's at Kate's Corner or anywhere else in town, you're going to have to quickly come to the conclusion that you can't apply that 100-foot setback. And in many of these situations, you're not going to be able to apply anything more restrictive than what's already on the books and even those are somewhat restrictive. Again, if the goal is to truly provide incentives for these property owners or investors to transition these properties to a desired outcome, you have to provide flexibility. And again, that's the beauty of COID, whether you like it or not, that's the mechanism to get into a special permit process to provide the flexibility on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
And then, and I just wanted to make a comment to the concern for Hart Pond. I'm very familiar with the concern about Hart Pond because I sat through a number of Conservation Commission meetings about the proper way in which to handle the issues that are there. But in this case, where we're talking about either development of new structures or parking lots or redevelopment of existing parking lots, there are stormwater standards that have to be met, and many of the concerns that were expressed about stormwater would be mitigated through that. So we're not, things, whatever, I don't know exactly what condition they're in right now, either at Maxwell's or for that matter on the Lockheed properties, but anything that involves any sort of redevelopment or new development is going to get reviewed with regards to stormwater to ensure that a lot of those issues don't occur. So I just wanted to make that comment.
And just to piggyback on Joel's comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joel, Massachusetts, I think, is one of the few states that actually has specific stormwater regulations that far exceed any federal.
Yeah, ours are, yeah.
Yeah, so some of the studies that were cited weren't Massachusetts-based, they weren't Massachusetts-specific. So in other parts of the country, those studies were absolutely correct. If there is no, if there's only a minimum federal standard, assuming there is, that's not adequate.
Yep.
Which is why I think Massachusetts historically has had very stringent water quality, stormwater standards. Still doesn't go all the way to protect watershed level planning, but for purposes of specific developments on specific properties, it's a pretty high threshold.
Yeah, but I do want to say the Hart Pond Association has done a tremendous job. They have taken on a lot of responsibility for that area and have really done a wonderful job with it. So I think they should be highly commended for what they've done. And we would certainly be mindful of that in anything that we considered as far as rezoning.
Marcy?
No, Joel asked the same thing I was looking at, because considering the properties over on the CB, like if we rezone things, how is that going to impact their properties? How's that rezoning? And then hearing about like where the setbacks are going to be. So that's definitely something I'm going to have to look into and how we want to do this. But that was my biggest concern there, is if we rezone that, how does it impact the homeowners that are currently in the both residential and CB zone?
Okay. Deirdre?
Well, I think it's kind of a two-part process. One is to think about what is it we're trying to achieve, and then, we don't have to rezone the whole patchwork quilt exactly the same. I mean, some of it could be left as it is, or some of it could be changed in a different way. I don't know. I don't want to make something necessarily worse or more complicated, but I mean, I think it has the potential to be, as the general manager of Lockheed said, a win-win-win, or somebody said that. And I think if we, try and do it in a way that envisions what we want, what the community wants, what the business wants, I think everyone has expressed a desire to work together to make it work. I think we can figure something out, but I mean, I don't think I have any idea what that is yet, but.
Okay, thanks. And from my perspective, I think everyone agrees that Lockheed has been a great neighbor. They've been great to the town, great to the residents in that area. And I think we all want to do what's best for the neighbors, the residents, the companies that are there, and for the future. I think one of the concerns from at least my perspective on this planning board is I've seen many cases already where the current tenant or the current neighbor has been great. There's been a zone that works well for them. They move out, and then it bites us in the back. So I think my concern is that we want to try to avoid that. Make it workable for everyone involved now, but also protect potential future issues. So, all right, in terms of next steps, I would like to propose that one or two folks come up with a straw person proposal that we can look at next time based on all of the feedback that we've gathered today. And that way we can have something to look at, react to, adjust, tweak. 'Cause I think we've had a few meetings now where we've gathered input and discussed and gotten some good ideas on which direction everyone seems to be aligned on. So now I think it's just putting it down on paper and reacting to that and seeing what we can do with it. So do I hear any volunteers?
I would volunteer for
I
that.
volunteer.
So we have 3 people who are volunteering.
Who's
I heard-
volunteering?
Joel, Anita, and Mike.
If there's 3, do we have to call a meeting? Are we gonna meet?
You should.
Or can we just leave it to 2, so we don't have to?
Isn't 4 a quorum?
4 is a quorum, but
Quorum.
the more people involved, the more it should be a little bit more public with notes and minutes.
Trying to avoid that.
We could post the meetings if it was,
I would like to try and keep it to a minimum for this first draft and then have the reaction and discussion in a larger group like this. I think that works well. So Mike and Joel, can you guys work together?
What about me?
I thought you said you wanted to back out.
No, I didn't say that.
I'm more than happy
can do
to,
this.
I'm
I've
more
got-
than happy to provide input, and I'll provide some of the products and let them do the sausage making, so.
All right.
So I'm fine with that.
All right, Joel, can you shoot some information over to Anita and Mike and Anita?
Yep.
The 2 of you run with it for?
Yep.
Are you able to do something before the next meeting?
Well, we could probably get a couple of pages out. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's put it on for the next meeting. I'm thinking if you outline the goals of what we're trying to do, I think we're hearing that we want to try and do a new zone. So without naming the zone, because we can do that later, maybe create
Yeah,
what
that's
the uses
what I
might look like.
Felt we were headed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you have a map of what the zones would be on the map. So those 3 things.
Now, I'm assuming that we want to think about this not just in the context of this particular neighborhood, but possibly also in the context of a general idea of how to solve this kind of problem
Yep.
in other places. Okay,
Yep.
I just want to make
Yep.
sure that that's part of the charter here.
Yep.
And I'm available to assist that, with that working group if need be.
Okay.
Great.
All right. So it's not technically a public hearing, so we don't need to continue it, correct? Okay. All right, so we will put that on the agenda for the beginning of next meeting. All right, next on the agenda, zoning bylaw amendments for town meeting. I think how I want to handle this, we've got 4 areas. We've got lighting, the general bylaw changes, floodplain, and the 129 overlay. I think what we can do is, since Kelly is here, we can do that one first, followed by general bylaw, which is fairly easy, then floodplain, and then the 129 overlay. What I'm thinking we can do is have that short presentation for each one, do question and answer, public input on that specific one, and then if we feel like we can vote tonight, take a vote on whether to move it forward and support it for town meeting. If we feel like it needs to continue, we can continue it to next meeting.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yeah.
Since we have 4 Pallet Drive, if people here for that, do we want to take
Take it out
that
of order.
first before we go into the zoning amendments? I mean, I'm sure,
We could.
I don't know how many people are here for the zoning
Yeah.
amendments, but we might want to get these people first in and out.
Yeah, okay, we can do that. All right, so why don't we take that out of order, and we will do 4 Palet Drive now, if Casey is here. I
He's
did
out
see
in the
him
hallway.
poking in. Oh, yeah, I should probably make that announcement. So the town manager, I looked over the spring meeting town warrant, and the town manager did remove the Kate's Corner area from the potential bylaw changes at town meeting. So we will not be discussing those in the zoning bylaw hearing, because those are removed, and those will not be brought forward to town meeting unless we're ready to down the road. All right, Casey.
Hello, hello. Casey Ferrero with Howard Stein Hudson. Thank you very much for having us back here. Quick update, we did receive Conservation Commission approval last night, so we'll look to get that order of conditions issued to us. Diving into the changes since the last time we were here, I know last time I was here I presented you all with kind of conceptual idea of changes that would reduce the impacts into the wetland buffer zone, which I know is not your primary concern, but overall reduce the scope of the project. And then additionally, we would be removing the encumbrance of the Castoria parking lot that they paved over into our property. What you've seen in your submission packet that you received is the full engineering for that conceptual, which shows where we still meet all stormwater standards. As part of a redevelopment project, we do end up with slightly less impervious in the end with getting rid of the Castoria parking lot versus the addition of our parking lot. Another item that you received in your packet was a landscaping plan to reduce or to reintroduce some additional plantings to make back for what we're removing as part of the proposal. In that landscaping plan, you'll see 2 maple trees, 8 ferns, and 6 bearberry shrubs. The 8 ferns rather are listed under shrubs in the landscape schedule. I learned last night that they are actually not shrubs; they are ferns. Thought they would be one and the same, but they are not. But they are actually really good for the wetland buffer zone there, so we're going to maintain them as the proposal. They provide habitat for reptiles, amphibians. They do good for water quality. They have a good root system to protect erosion control, which is kind of necessary where we're trying to reestablish that area after we remove the pavement. And then additionally, we added a bunch of stuff to the operation and maintenance plan that was discussed at this meeting the last time we were here. Some of that is the line striping, snow removal, and we also added a plan that doesn't necessarily dictate where to put the snow as much as it dictates where we don't want you to put the snow. The smaller events where you're not going to be piling it in locations, we still want you to be able to plow it to the curb lines. It's really those bigger events where you're going to be looking for space, we want to tell you where not to put it. In addition to that maintenance plan that is in your packet, we're also going to put signage up. So signage up on that kind of plan south, the bottom side where we abut up against the drainage ditch that goes back behind Dunshire. We don't want snow piling up there. And then additionally, right up against the infiltration basin, we're adding some signage for no snow storage there. And then where we are removing the pavement from the Castoria parking lot, we're going to sign that for no snow storage as well. that's because we don't want them pushing snow and salt back into what we just reestablished. Excuse me. I did receive an engineering letter from DPW yesterday afternoon. As far as the planning board comments, there was 3 outstanding, one of which was regarding freeboard on the infiltration basin. So I touched base with Sheila this afternoon. We do indeed meet that 1 foot of freeboard, so she's all set with that. The mounding analysis is a pretty easy fix. We just have to extend out the duration and time at which she wants us to analyze it. And what that does is essentially takes what we analyzed was the 24-hour of the storm itself. What she wants us to extend that to, just to make sure, is the additional 13 hours of drawdown that the infiltration basin will have after that. So extending that time period, she'll be satisfied with that. And then the final comment she had was to sign the snow ban parking for no parking unless in an emergency. I discussed that with her this afternoon because I really don't want to put signage in the middle of that grass field or grass area in the back that we want to have kind of for the children to play. And then essentially what she said, and she talked about it with Tony, was if the planning board feels that signage itself is not necessary, we can put it into writing, into the conditions, or some other form. We can put it in supplemental data report or something to say that it will be operated by the management company of the facility to ensure that no parking is taking place except for those emergency situations. And she said she would be fine with that. I just don't want random signposts in the middle of where we want the children playing back there. Beyond that, I don't think I have any other changes. It was mostly just engineering what we presented to you last time. So I'll open it up for any questions here from the board.
Evan, do you have any other items to add?
I do not. Thank you.
All right, we'll take it around the board. I'll start with Mike.
I think the bases are covered about as well as they can be.
Okay, John?
Yeah, it sounds like you've addressed the things that came up at the last meeting, so.
Anita? Mike?
No comments.
Joel?
I did look at the supplemental data report, not just that one, but the last 2 or 3.
Sure.
And because I was concerned about the reduction in the size of the basin and also the flow, the direction of the flow, the overflow. And in general, I think that that what's being proposed is an improvement from the existing conditions. I mean, it would have been ideal if you could have gotten the water more directly into the wetland as opposed to into the ditch, but that's just not possible. And so it's being directed as far away as it possibly can be, which is an improvement over the way it is now. And it meets all of the standards, and it is an improvement. So I think a nod to the especially the Caputo Starkweather Caputo. So I don't remember which way it goes, but I yield to your desire for greater trees and commissions, and in general, I think that this is definitely a workable plan, and I'm perfectly fine with it.
Okay. Marcy?
None at this moment.
Deirdre? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm good. Thank you for everybody putting their heads together and trying to come up with a better solution.
Hey, Chris, just one thing in the decision. It says the fence needs to be repaired or replaced.
I know we'll get to some of that
Okay.
in a bit.
Oh.
All right. I noticed that the O&M plan doesn't have anything about the mirror. You mentioned that you guys were going to put the mirror and then...
So if that is something solidified that you guys want, I know Kathy came up and spoke, that that walkway is actually just down to a laundry room that doesn't actually get used on a
that's right.
day-to-day basis. So we kind of thought we were okay without that, but if that's something that the board wants us to install in that fence, certainly add it before Mylars and just have it on the plans and in the supplemental data report, or the O&M rather. Totally up to you guys.
I think it might be a good idea to have it, because if someone is carrying stuff up from the basement, they might not be able to see around the corner very clearly.
Well, I think the point of that was that if they're coming up from the basement from the laundry room, they're not going out into the driveway. They're coming up and going back into the building to carry the laundry in.
Okay. Does it go into a boiler room or anything like that? Or is it just the laundry room?
It's the basement for the entire building.
Okay.
So there's really only, I think, 2 units that don't have access to the basement. And
You need to have
that
a
would need to
name
come
and
down through there.
Okay.
We adding a mirror or not adding a mirror?
I'm fine without it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not make it more complicated than it has to be.
And then I would be fine with the no parking signs in those spaces, and just put it into the O&M plan that they would have to maintain that.
As for going into the O&M plan, just trying to envision how that would go in or how you would want to see it.
Or a special condition, maybe?
I was thinking
Special
maybe a
condition,
special
maybe cleaner.
condition, yeah.
Okay.
So, no parking in the grass area unless it's a declared snow emergency?
Correct.
Yep. And then I think Sarita may address this, but I'm going to address it first. The recycling, I noticed in some of the pictures that where you guys are proposing the recycling is completely plowed in with snow, and I know that that's probably a town plowing issue. But it would be good to maybe put some no snow storage signs there as well, if you could. Like around that telephone pole maybe, or the light pole.
So, I agree that it's likely where the town is plowing the cul-de-sac. We can I'm trying to see where a sign would actually help that. We could also make it as part of their property management company to ensure that it stays clear even after the town plows.
That'd be a good idea.
Because the town's I plowed for the town for a while. They're gonna do what they want to do. So, I'd say maybe a condition that makes sure that the property ensures that it's clear and accessible.
That'd be good.
If that's good.
All right, that's all I have. Any members of the public want to speak?
Sarita Fernandez, 27 Dunshire Drive. If you wouldn't mind pulling up what I sent. Some of this we'll go through quickly because some of it was addressed last night. I have some answers on some of the things, so. Tried to make it quick so we didn't have to hop between drawings. Oops, sorry. I'm gonna just keep on going. If you want to go to the next part, I'm showing this part because I want to show a little bit of the history of the property to understand something that's beyond the culverts being undersized. Back in December of 2021, the 4 Points, who's the maintenance company for Palet Drive, they came in and they hand dug a ditch from Palet to the back of my property in the purpose of drainage for that area. This was done in what we consider now the 25-foot buffer zone. There was no contact in conservation. They didn't contact the town engineer at that time. I had made some calls because I didn't even know if this was allowable because there at that time was no drainage. If you go to the next slide. this is some of the impact of what happened when they dug that ditch. You can see that erosion occurred. It just kept on sliding through. After the time when they did it, it was in the wintertime. By the summertime, water just kept on coming through in that area and just digging it deeper and actually sliding down the back hill and making it worse. You can go to the next one. So I kept on contacting the town, trying to find out more information. We know that trash goes back there. Water's going back there. We talk about the fence. They're going to be moving the recycling bins. We'll talk about that a little bit later because I don't know if what they're doing is really feasible. But right now, I told them yesterday, I was kind of hoping they'd go pick them up. The recycling bins right now are in my backyard, tipped over. The stuff's coming out of them. I can't get to them. I hope they go and pick them up tomorrow. But they're not even using them for like the last 2 weeks since it's been snowed in. This is interesting. So back in 1962, this is the original road plan for Palet. They actually had a catch basin at the bottom and a pipe. I'm going to show you. Originally, they had a catch basin here. There's a pipe going to the back of the easement, which is what you would expect because it's the low point. In the mid-90s, when the sewer company came in, they actually took away that catch basin and it became the sewer manhole and no drainage. All drainage was taken out at that point. So from about 1995-ish to 2021, when they had dug the ditch, there was no drainage whatsoever in this area. And then just a little bit more history, as I was still fighting erosion, contacted the stormwater superintendent. At the time, that was Dennis. They came in, and this was interesting to me and a little frustrating because they came in and they just clear cut. They went through like a loader. They dug it out behind. This is the property to the right of me, and they didn't keep grades or anything during the project. And then they put in some riprap. They put in a swale, which you can see in the next picture. And so what the end product was they put some riprap here to extend it in, and it did divert the water into there. But part of the problem is because that's so flat, it just backs up. So you can go to the next one. We were still having issues with water. You can see here, because this is where their dumpster was a long time ago, for the water just eroding down the hill. They came in and they installed some curbing. You can see here, it's very minimal, but they came in and did that. That seemed to help divert the water down, but you can go to the next. After all that was done, water still pools here. And as we get storms, this actually comes closer and closer to my house. Back in December, not this December, but the previous December, it got within 7 feet of my garage. I'm glad it didn't go in, but that's kind of like the result. Let's go. One of the things I noticed through the drawings that they had in their plot plan, there's an elevation marker here, 98.4. You have another one over here which goes to 97. This is one of those pipes that we're talking about for an exit way. Over approximately 60 feet, it only has a 0.5% grade going down there. It's pretty flat. And I didn't have areas in here, but there is some pretty flat sections even when you look at it, and you almost wonder if it goes uphill a little bit before it goes down. So the reason why I kind of bring that up, if you go to the next, the direction that they're going to be flowing the water now is going into here. My fear is that because this area is flat, it's going to back up and just add to the excess water load that we have. That's why I really was hoping when they were talking about it coming out of the side, they were going to get it shuffled this direction. I got really frustrated because this is the pipe that's coming out here. The water's going to come down. It's going to go on either side. I hope it stays that way. I mean, there's a lot of like water at sometimes that's going to be coming out of there at a pretty good rate. So that's kind of why I showed you some of this, because water just pooling up is going to cause problems. So it would have been nice to see it if they could have got it some way that way. The other thing is just in a lot of the drawings and the current conditions, there's nothing that shows the swale. So that's why it would have been nice to see that in either the town drawings or whatever. Yesterday at the conservation meeting, David is looking at some of those things and he's trying to help me a little bit, talking to the DPW to see if there's anything that could be done. We don't know, so he is looking at it. This next section is about the snow removal plans, and if you go up here, I did question this last night a little bit because that area in yellow is not included. The red is all the ones that they're saying is no snow. The one in yellow is not included there, and part of the problem is that's adjacent to the swale. Right now the swale gets covered with snow all the time. You can't see it. So I did ask about having bollards put in, but I guess that's something to ask more of the town than them. But this snow piling up, and something I want to show you. This dumpster, by the way, isn't even in its enclosure all the way because they can't even get it straight on because all this snow piling up is not allowing them to get a straight shot into there. So that's why I was appreciative about you talking about the sign about no snow, because it's just blocking, but it's still going to block on the right. You can keep on going.
Next one.
Yeah, next one, please. That one's just accidental. And this is in regards to the parking. I asked about this last night. If you can go to the next one. That one parking spot that is there is directly adjacent to the swale, and it's pretty close to the wetland right there. I'm concerned just with the fact that you're putting a car there that is going to be dripping stuff, and it's going to have direct impact to the wetland. That was discussed a little bit last night. Part of the discussion was they felt like it would hinder the apartment complex, having to find one more space somewhere. I don't know about that, but this got taken care of. I saw that in the email, so you can skip that. The trash, my favorite topic. We know that this keeps on getting pushed over. We talked about it before. I really would like them to get a new fence, if possible, to help contain that, if you go up. I still have concerns about these things being able to go in straight. I don't know if it's even something that we could ask for. I don't know if that pad could be made wider, tipped out, so that it could fit both the recycling and the trash. Because right now, I just quickly took a look at the drawing, and you can actually see by the tire tracks, they're unable to drive in straight right now there to put it in. What happens when we put a car there that's parking there all the time? Are they really going to be able to get into there to empty the trash? In the upper one, you can see how crooked it is. It's the fence post there to there. There's a pretty good portion. It's kitty cornered out right there. And you can see too, the side door's open. This is their trash right now that's over there, but the recycling is being planned to be put here, right? Which would be right behind this side of this door. You can go to the next one. 100% of the time, there isn't any time of the year that these fence doors are closed. So if they're going to be storing those recycling there, how's their recycling truck going to see it? And if they're not seeing it, they're not going to pick it up. They can say that they're going to have somebody pull it out, but who? Because there's no maintenance on site there. So, like I said, I don't know if this can be widened as an ask. I don't know if we can make it so it contains the recycling. I don't even know if it's sufficient. They have 2 recycling bins for, I think, 8 apartments, 2-bedroom apartments. It seems pretty small. Let's go to the next. This is just some pictures, different parts of the season, because I see it in my backyard. But if you can go with just up here on the corner. The orange, I kind of put a line in. That's the corner of my property, and that's where they are right now.
Your property's on the other side of the fence?
This side. Yeah, so if you go up. Do you know when you look to the back of the swale?
Yeah.
That's my yard. So my yard goes this way.
Yeah.
So the orange fence up there is actually my edge of my property, which is the top of the easement. The chain link fence right here is the other end of the easement. So I have the easement fenced in on my side. And this fence actually that they have here is actually for a couple of sections is not even on their property. I just would like them to ensure that their recycling is contained properly. Again, the fencing, this one. The next slide was about, I was talking about the 6-inch clearance. I found out yesterday that is going to be a requirement for any of the fencing within the buffer zone, which would be this section here, all the way around here, and anything that they put new, I guess, down here, or repaired. Go to the next one. I wasn't clear when I first looked at this if there actually was going to be a fence in this area, because this drawing said existing fence would remain. This one didn't say anything. Last night, Casey did say they are going to plan on keeping that fence there. Like I said, I would like to ask that it be a new fence, and also, if it's possible, have this section of fence actually be on their property. Good news for them is I'm putting up a fence next summer, so from here over is going to be all fenced for myself. That's general. You can skip that. That's just why a fence is good. Keep on going. I think that was proposed plantings. You talked a little bit about this. I would like to see more shrubs, but it sounded like you used the ferns instead. The ferns are good. Go to the next one. Bearberries isn't the best choice here. We talked a little bit about that last night. Casey actually agreed that it probably wasn't the best choice, but he said if they survive, they're good. If they don't survive, he'll pick something else. because they're actually meant to be in drier areas, not a wet area. You go to the next one. Oh, and wait, hold on a second. Go back up. The reason why is they're putting them here. Where's all the water coming out from the retention pond? Right there. So they'll get wet. I was asking about where the shrubs were last night. He said they were the ferns. They are good. Like I said, it would be great to see something extra. They are putting in red maples, another awesome choice. I think they're fantastic. It would have been great to see another one here, maybe one up by the dumpster, but didn't really look like it was in their plan. Invasive management, we kind of took care of that last night, so I don't really have any extra on that. So I think that was it. Thanks.
Casey, would you like to comment on anything?
Sure. I think a good portion of that was regarding the trash and the recycle up front. We did run auto turn on the dumpster truck, or the trash truck. It can access it, it can get in there. Whether they have to kitty corner it one way or another, that's how they're going to do it. I'm not going to dictate for them how to do their job. The recycle, we're not planning on keeping it inside the enclosure. We're keeping it right outside. It's not messy materials in there. It's supposed to be clean recycle, so I don't really have concerns about it being outside of the dumpster pad itself, especially where they're just the barrels. They're not an actual, like a 2-yard dumpster or something like that, or a 5-yarder. So as far as the trash goes, I don't necessarily think there's any issues. If the board feels otherwise, please let me know. I asked the client or the applicant how often they have recycle emptied, and she said she's going to find that out from the management company. We can review that if it happens, if it needs to be increased based on usage. We can certainly do that, and we'll work with our management company to make sure that that happens. As far as the snow, we talked about this yesterday, having that put in as the snow store, or into the snow storage plan or snow removal plan, that area up there by the dumpster. The only real areas that are going to be pushed into there is from the cul-de-sac. None of our areas, like the parking in the front there, is just going to be pushed straight back up into our property. It's not going to be pushed down for the cul-de-sac, so I don't really think it's necessary to add that into the snow removal. Again, the town's not going to have any desire to look at our plans on where to put their stuff. So as far as the bearberries go, they don't thrive in wet areas. What I told David and the Conservation Commission yesterday was that that is in an area, has about 3-foot separation from the water table or more. It's not at the end of the pipe. It's to replace the disturbance caused by adding in that pipe, so it's around the top of the pipe. So it's not going to be inundated with water on every storm event. It's only going to be wet as water does overtop the weir of the pond, which does happen in a 2-year or 5-year storm event. But it doesn't happen with every storm event, so it will see water, but anywhere you put them, it's going to see some sort of water. I do think it's dry enough for them to be put in. If we decide that we want to change that planting to something that might thrive better there, we'll certainly review that, and I told David that I would work with our environmental scientist to maybe recommend something that might be better. But for now, we'll proceed with the plantings as proposed, because as part of a standard condition in the order of conditions, I believe it also makes it into the decision, is that we have to guarantee the landscaping, at least through I think it's a 2-year growing period or a 1-year growing period, and it's even, I believe it made it into our operation and maintenance plan, that anything that dies has to be replaced. So if we plant it and it dies and I can't certify the as-built, we're going to have to rectify that anyway. So we'd like to move forward with the landscaping plan as proposed, and if we do want to change the plantings, I'll ask David, I'll ask Evan if they're good with it, and I think that's kind of the path forward that we'd like to take on the plantings there. A lot of what you talked about, the swale, is just not under my jurisdiction. I did have a pretty long conversation with Trevor, assistant DPW engineer today, and they do have a watershed study going on for this area actively. They have retained a civil engineer that is actively looking at the Stunshire area. So while personally and the applicant here, we can't do anything about the ditch itself or how pale it is graded or how pale it drains. It is being looked into, and whether they have faith in the town to do it, I can't help that either, but it is actively being looked into. Beyond that, I don't think there's anything else that I need to address.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question on the dumpster pad. Sure. That the reason that it's in the, that it will continue in the orientation that it is because you're not touching the dumpster pad, just leaving it as is.
Correct.
Okay.
We want to leave that area existing.
Okay. I mean, it seems like it's more of a management thing, but the doors being left open continuously, I definitely agree, would hide the existence of the recycle. So what is it that can be done about that?
The doors being left open, I mean, we can have, I don't necessarily know how this would go in, but we'll make sure our management company knows that they need to be shut. It might be the trash removal company themselves just opening it and then leaving it open. Again, we don't have control over them, but we can make sure that the company that is on site, that's visiting the site, knows if they see it open, get them closed.
Okay, so yeah, that would be good. And have you looked at the access to the dumpster pad, given the current markings, and if there is a car there, what that access will be? So you've looked at that as far as how?
We've looked at the auto turn of that with a full-size trash
You
truck.
have, okay.
Correct.
All right. Well, good luck to that person parking there if it doesn't work. All right, thank you.
Just,
Go ahead.
I'm just going to ask, is there anything that could be done to, either house or keep those recycling bins stable so they're not flipped? Like, say there's a winter storm and you have high winds and it blows them over. It looked from the photos like they're blown over, partially covered by snow. And
So I think that's due to where they were located. They were located at the end of the cul-de-sac, where basically the town is plowing into them anyway, so they're likely knocked over by snow being pushed up against that. We're proposing to relocate them up right next to that, where the dumpster pad is, so they'll be up against the fence if there's wind force that's going to knock them over, they're just getting knocked over into the fence and then kind of right themselves, but
They should be inside.
Is there any reason they're not there now?
we can have them move there tomorrow, I'm sure.
Why are they not in the enclosure?
I don't-
There's room.
I don't think there's room.
I mean, it looks dumpy. I mean, it needs to be cleaned up. And, I mean, recycle is, yes, recycle, but it's still trash. And it should be in the enclosure of the dumpster for the facility.
So what we can do is we can evaluate whether or not there is room within it to get them in. I'm just looking at the area we have there. And then if there is not, perhaps we can just expand the fencing to,
It seems like
Go
that would
around
solve a lot of problems. If you're keeping the doors shut, then the neighbors would not see the trash of the facility.
we can evaluate that as well.
That should be done. Thank you.
Anything else? All
When
right,
are we having the discussion on the fence?
next.
Okay. You said it would come up, so.
Do you have the topic for
No,
the
I
fence?
think- No, I just think the fence, the discussion and the decision is to be repaired or replaced, so which is the board, what does the board want?
Well, I think
I think the fence should be replaced.
Yeah,
I do too.
I'm in agreement on that
A
one.
new stockade fence put down, 6 foot, to block the neighbors that have been, there's not much happening. None of this improvement is helping the neighbors. And I think a fence for visual would help the neighbors. At least they're getting something out of this whole, they've been taking care of this, right? So I think dealing with this situation, that's just my opinion. You guys all have decisions too, so.
I agree with Mike.
No, I'm in agreement after taking a look at it myself. I think the fence really, repairing it's not gonna do enough. I think it does need to be replaced.
Well, I agree, there needs to be a fence. I don't think we should involve ourselves necessarily in how that fence gets there. I think you may be right. I think it may be impractical to repair, but I don't think we ought to be the judges of that. What we ought to say is there shall be a fence.
So who is the judge? Who's the judge? It's not gonna be the neighbors, it's not gonna be the owner, it's not gonna be the
Well-
building inspector. The only authority in front of to help solve this is the planning board.
But I think it's a pretty objective standard that there is a functional full fence.
Yeah,
There is or there isn't.
yeah.
Okay. Is it functional now?
No.
No, it
And I,
doesn't appear.
but
to
I
be.
think in the last meeting, Casey mentioned that they would take the panels from the other side, replace what they can, and then create new panels
Yeah,
or buy
As
new panels
necessary.
for the rest of what couldn't be repaired.
I mean,
We're
I-
definitely agreeing that there's going to be a functional fence as part of that, and it's in the plans as
Yeah.
a fence to be repaired. So there will be a functional 6-foot fence. It's how we're getting to it is, I guess, the question.
But is it chain link or is it?
No, stockade.
Stockade.
Okay, 'cause-
Right.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's
Yeah.
clear.
And I think the last meeting you said you're gonna take the old sections and
Correct.
put as
Right.
many as
And
you
if-
can, and then,
If we work with a contractor and they say there's simply not enough here to put this into functional condition, that your best option is to replace it, then that's the path we're going to have to go. Because as I certify this, I have to certify to the plans that I've proposed, and my plans propose that the fence is going to be repaired. So if the fence does not end up repaired, my certification is going to have to say, please accept this even though the fence is not repaired, and that's simply not going to happen by either this board or the Conservation Commission. Yeah.
Are we allowed to ask for a new fence? Or are we
It's a
not
reasonable,
allowed
it's
to?
a
not?
reasonable condition. It's not, as Mike indicated, it's not something that the board has typically specified. I mean, as long as it's functional and serves its intended purpose, which is, visual screening.
I still want a new fence. I just don't believe it's gonna be repaired adequately. I think it may pass some other third party who's not involved and hasn't heard the whole story. But we've heard the whole story, we've seen it. I just don't believe that anything other than a new fence is gonna work.
So just to add some clarity to this, in addition to the engineer's certification prior to prior to occupancy of the site improvements, David Kuntz and myself will go out and do inspections on behalf of the Commission and Planning Board. Let's assume it passes that visual inspection that day of, and there's a windstorm, and then sections of it, come loose. The condition still applies. They're responsible in perpetuity to maintain a functional fence. Normally what happens is, after the fact, is an abutter will notify town hall, and then we'll initiate enforcement.
Still feel the same.
Can we, this just says a fence
hear
needs to be
what you're saying,
repaired or
but
replaced. Can we make
it's
sure
the
it's,
yeah, we can probably reword it to say a fully functional fence
no,
needs to be.
no, I want the stockade. Like, I just don't want like a chain link fence. This just says a fence.
I think there's a plan detail, is there?
Yeah, there's a plan
Plan
detail with
for
the
a stockade
stockade.
fence. It's
Okay.
not going to be chain link.
So we can say maybe a fully functional stockade fence.
Here it is right here, Anita.
Yeah, it's on there.
That's fine. I mean, I didn't realize you inspected it, and I didn't realize that you have to certify. So,
have to certify.
hearing that, you certify that this fence is gonna be repaired to Evan and the officials' likings. Hopefully it meets muster.
It's a real quick question. Do you want to get up? Sarita Fernandez, 27 Dunshire Drive. The fence that's directly adjacent to the dumpster is not on their property. So can there be a condition that there's fencing put up on their property line to block the trash on that section? You can see it in the line of the property. Because my fear is they'll say it's not their fence, so they don't have to replace it, and that's like a really shitty section. Sorry for my word, but I think you can see it. Is it in that plan? Yeah, right here. I mean, you can see this section here, and you can kind of see it next to mine. This area here, their fencing comes over into this person's property. So it would really be beneficial if they could extend their fence out and keep it in their property and actually repair that section because it's really bad. I mean, they've had the opportunity to repair this fence I've lived there 10 years. I mean, there's times I went up there with a zip tie to try to help keep it together because it's that bad. I don't see, I mean, we deal with this all the time. I really would like to see a new fence. I don't think it's a detrimental ask with everything else that's occurring to us not to have a new fence there. Thanks.
Just as far as that one section goes, if you want to add a condition that we work with the property owner down there to move that section of the fence onto our property as part of the repair,
Fair enough.
we can do that to get it on our property, and then it's our responsibility.
So is that fence right now not your fence?
It's our fence, it's part of our fence line, it just dips into their property.
Okay, so.
So we can
you
work
have
with
to
that
pro-
property
You have
owner.
to put it on your property anyways.
Right. So that's what I'm saying, if we
You
want to
don't
make it a
have to work with
condition well, her concern was that since it's not on our property, we'd claim that it's not our responsibility. I'm offering to move it onto my property to make sure it is my responsibility.
Okay. We'll make that condition.
Evan, you got that?
Thank you.
All right. Any other members of the public?
Michelle Caputo, Starkweather, 19 Dunshire Drive. So actually, I'm going to start with the statement that we were quite panicky about all of the destruction, and we're grateful that some of that destruction now involves the impermeable surface at Castori's, and it's going to be somewhat rewilded, and we're very grateful for that. And like our stress level went down to, I don't know, like a 5 instead of a 12 on the scale of 1 to 10. I did mention at the meeting last night with the Conservation Commission that there's coming through the water mitigation ditch. I'm at 19, at 21, because it's easier to get down her driveway than behind my house and behind the fence. I took pictures of that little teeny tiny the tube that goes, the culvert, it goes underneath my, the corner of my yard. That's literally all of the culvert that I own is just that little tube. I did take pictures of it because, and I had taken it before it snowed, and I'll show you. It's pretty much full. That's part of the reason the water's not moving. It's gonna decide it's not going to work anymore just because it's ornery. But you can see that's on 21 side. It is maybe 15 inches of open and the rest is full.
Yeah.
And the water mitigation ditch on Patty's side, 21, is that full as well. On the other side, on my side of the pipe, it's quite a bit more open. It's still pretty full, but it's quite a bit more open and it's deeper. So all of that water that's pooling at Sarita's and at Patty's and all of those other yards, it does pool in my yard too. It will come up over the water mitigation ditch. But a big portion of this is simply that it is full of sediment. I do know that Mass Mosquito had sent out, they came out, Katrina came out, and I mentioned this to the Conservation Commission, that Katrina from Mass Mosquito came out. They are scheduling sometime in the spring to come and clean that out, because I guess Mass Mosquito can come and do that because it helps prevent mosquito infestations. But also I've heard rumors that maybe DPW might consider at least getting that tube less sediment filled. I think that would make a big difference. And I know I had called and they were kind of like, we're not sure if we're allowed to touch that. So however that works, we would be grateful, because that adds one less or takes away one more thing that causes flooding in everybody's backyards. But I'll also mention we were excited that we're going to be 14 shrubs, yay! And now we're down to 6. We were a little disappointed. I get it, you got 8 ferns. If we could have a few more shrubs in addition to or in replacement, we'd be happier. My daughter, who's usually the leaf litter girl, we need to have deciduous leaves and we need to have, because that's the wildlife, said, oh, if you could mention like the wild roses that live in this area, they're supposed to be very good for wetlands and wildlife. The natural ones, not like the hybrided whatever. And I said, well, I'll see if I can get that in there. She couldn't make it tonight, so I said, I'll toss it in there. So we were hoping for more shrubs, but at the same time, we're very grateful that there's going to be a lot more planting. It's not going to be all impermeable surface. And I guess, we were all kind of like we're going to give, they're going to give. And in the end, I think this is mostly pretty much the best compromise. And I'm very grateful for everyone that has been willing to compromise all around. Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to point out that anything related to that swale or the ditch or drainage is really not in our purview. It's mostly a DPW conservation issue. So I'd highly encourage folks to work with David Coons and DPW to keep trying to resolve that area.
Hi, Jillian Larkham, 9 Dunshire. I would also, I was looking at like the fence while walking, and I would really love to see a new fence for where I live. And just, it would be one thing with the trees gone just to have, and I've lived there for 8 years, almost 9 years, and it hasn't gotten any better, and it really isn't going to get any better. And so I would really like to see a new fence just to help our side of the neighborhood kind of keep the trash out and just to finally replace it, because I know fences are expensive, but it's just really not a pretty fence. So I'm tired. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Any other members of the public wish to speak?
I was just going to offer to show folks the pictures that I had taken of the fence back in January. Yes.
Could you come up to the microphone?
Yeah, I was going to offer to show the pictures that I had taken to everybody here so they see the same picture. Yes, the fence at the back of the property is in poor repair, but I think the fence that goes along the brook is in pretty reasonable shape. Yeah, there are a few missing pieces, but we intend to replace those. If you'd like, I can show you the pictures that I took.
Yep.
And this is probably the worst end of it. This is the other end looking towards the front.
Okay.
So I think the fence that is along the brook is probably repairable. Yes, the fence along the back is in poor repair. We were going to replace it until this parking.
Go to the microphone.
It was replacing the fence was in our list of things to do until this parking lot project came along. So as time goes on, we would replace the other sections, but we only want to replace the sections that we really need to right now. And I don't think that entire line along the brook needs to be done at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Casey, any last items?
No, actually, I just wanted to reiterate that I don't necessarily know that this holds any weight to the decision, but I had been told by Kathy several times that there is plans, they do plan on fully replacing the fence over time. They're trying to see what damage this project is going to do to their budgets as it is for when they figure out when they have money to replace that fence. So the ask is for now, if we are able to, let us repair the fence as through the condition. We want to put it in a functional form, and then in time, when the money comes back after the project is completed, they need to replace the fence anyway. They're going to do that on their own without, the implementation of that through a decision from the planning board. I know that doesn't make it into the decision. It doesn't really hold weight for you guys, but that is still their plan.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Any other comments?
One more
Conditions.
very small question. I think it was answered. What kind of maple?
Red.
Red? Okay. That's appropriate for, that's fine.
All right. Before we get to the fence topic, Any other special conditions or questions? All right. In terms of the fence, what are people thinking? New fence, repair as much as they can, and then new sections for what they can't? To the standards of the engineering certification and inspection? Are people okay with that?
I'm fine with that. I didn't know that he was gonna certify it, and I didn't know that the town was gonna inspect it. But just hearing what the owner just mentioned, that the backside really needs to be repaired. I mean, the entire fence has to be repaired, not just the swale part, the entire property line.
So the backside is getting removed altogether as part of the project.
But you put a new one back in.
Not in the back.
Right, okay.
Not what crosses the property. The part there's going to be a new fence along the Tingsboro Road side of it. So that top side of the plan, there's going to be a new fence. Those panels are what's going to be used to replace the bottom side.
Fill and fill.
Correct.
Between the neighbors,
Correct.
so.
Joel, are you okay with that?
No, but on the other hand, it doesn't rise to the level of voting no, in my opinion, so I would not. I mean, I would be willing to vote yes, even though I still think it should have a new fence, because I think in many other ways, there's been a lot of compromises which are appreciated. And, so I still think it should be a new fence, but it's not going to make me vote no.
Okay.
I'm with Joel, with the new fence. I just don't see, I just don't think the incremental cost of this, of a fence, like, between repairing it, trying to move it, versus just putting it in,
As someone who just put in a new fence not that long ago, it's extremely expensive, especially for sections
So was an
where that
impairment
picture just showed. What I just saw in the picture, there are sections that are perfectly fine, and a big stretch of fence seems to be fine. I mean, yeah, there are sections that are completely torn down and non-existent, but if they have enough panels to put those in, if they don't, then they'll have to buy new panels.
I don't know, it just seems a little cost ineffective to try to repair and move a fence, and then, let's say, 2 or 3 years down the line, that fence is just junk, and now we got to replace it. So you're paying for a fence twice versus paying for it once.
We're also trying to work with a budget that we have right now.
I don't think we should be worrying about it. We should worry about what, not how. Any more than we should worry about what kind of, wiring they've got, or, there are a million things here that are decisions at the construction point. I agree. My guess is they're probably going to wind up replacing the darn thing in a couple of years anyway, but that's not coming out of our budget. As long as we can guarantee the result, I think we're fine.
Okay. All right. Yes. Sure.
Michelle Caputo, Starkweather, 19 Dunshire Drive. So as abutters and neighbors, what is our recourse if we are looking at a fence and saying, wow, that lasted 15 minutes, or that lasted 2 years, or however long? What is our recourse? And, just because if you say, okay, well, they have to repair it, they had to repair it a long time ago and it didn't get repaired. It's my understanding that you're responsible for maintaining your fence. And, I've heard multiple of my neighbors saying that fence has never been repaired as far as they can tell. So I'm just curious, what is our recourse if there is an issue? And how strong is that enforcement? Thank you.
Evan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that because this is part of a project with a condition, they do have recourse in terms of the building inspector.
Yeah, even without a condition, it's shown on the plan.
Yeah.
So you will be making contact with the building commissioner and asking him to enforce the planning board's decision that requires a functional fence. That goes for landscaping, lighting, anything else that's shown on the plan or in the decision.
And part of the reason why it wasn't applicable before is because there was no project with plans
Right.
under our jurisdiction.
But Evan, there will be a condition for this, correct?
Yeah, there definitely
Yeah.
will be a condition for this particular decision. May I suggest, at a minimum, you may want to consider closing the hearing?
Yep.
If you want to take the time to review and vote the draft decision, you can do that tonight. If you don't, I can clean it up and have it for you for your March 12th meeting.
Are people comfortable voting on the decision? Did people read the decision ahead of time? Pretty minimal conditions, except for the ones we added tonight. Evan, could you go
I have
review them?
4 special conditions. First one is the fence along the southern property line with Dunshare Drive shall be repaired or replaced to be functional. Number 2.
Functional stockade.
Yep. Number 2, no parking within the grass area unless declared snow emergency. Number 3, property management company shall clear snow around dumpster and recycling to maintain clearance. And, let's see, back up to number 1. It's also this is the fence. All fencing shall be located on property, coordination with the abutting property owner as necessary. And then the 4th one wasn't definitive, but recycling bins to be located within dumpster enclosure. Or consideration or exploration, I think is what Casey suggested.
Are you okay with the definitive on that one, or?
Yeah, so what I'm offering is we'll see if we can locate them within the existing enclosure we have now, we'll do that. If not, we'll expand the fence to go around where they would fit. So I'm not gonna expand the concrete pad itself, but I'll expand the fence enclosure that goes around.
So either way, the recycle bins will go inside?
the enclosure.
Okay.
Correct. And enclosure.
That makes sense.
That helps.
And then Evan, I did have one additional correction. First page, number 3, missing an E on my.
Yep, I circled that as we were doing it.
All right, if people are comfortable voting on this decision tonight, we can close the public hearing and go right to a vote.
Well, I'll give you a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, we'll have to do a roll call. Deirdre?
I'm an aye.
Oh, to close it, yeah, go ahead.
Motion by Mike, second by Anita. Deirdre?
Yes.
Okay. Joel?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Anita?
Yes.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mike? Yes. Me, yes. So unanimous, public hearing is closed. Next, I will take a motion to approve the decision as amended tonight.
I'd like to propose another change, and that is on the facts, on number 6. I'd like to strike the word only, and that it would just read, 8 trees will be removed versus 16 previously proposed, or something like that.
I know the public hearing is closed, but I believe the number now is 10, is that correct, Matt? It's 10 as the current proposal has it.
Thank you for that correction.
Yeah, thank you for the correction. Thank you for anticipating we were going to ask you that. That's it. That was the only.
All right, so I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to accept,
Approve.
to approve the, what is this? For pallet?
Special permit, site plan.
Yeah, special permit, site plan for Palet Drive with the conditions as amended tonight.
I will second that.
And the motion made by Anita, second by Mike. And
I'd like to make a comment before we vote.
Sure.
I still think that we should ask for a new fence. That's all.
Noted for the record, Joel.
Yeah.
All right, roll call. Deirdre.
Aye.
Joel.
Yeah, aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Anita.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
And I am an aye. Unanimous approval for Palet. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
All right, now we'll move on to the zoning articles. Again, just as a reminder, we will do the presentation and/or introduction. Board question and answer, we'll do public input, board comment and discussion, and then either voting to continue to next meeting or voting to approve and put to town meeting. All right, so we'll take lighting first.
Well, good evening. I'm Kelly Beatty, 117 Park Road, the principal author of this bylaw. And I have prepared some, this is essentially what I would give at town meeting. We'll step through it. First, a little bit of history. This is we've had a bylaw for outdoor lighting on the books since at least 2000.
Sorry to interrupt you, Kelly. Do we need to read I just realized this is a public hearing.
You can if you want, but you did indicate you're opening the public hearing.
Okay.
As noted on the agenda.
Okay, thanks, sorry.
It's okay. The existing bylaw was passed unanimously at town meeting in fall of 2000. It is basic, as there are more than 50 towns in the Commonwealth that have similar bylaws. It's pretty basic. It essentially requires that above a certain brightness in terms of lumens, that a light needs to be pointed down so that all of the light falls below horizontal. There are some exceptions, but it doesn't really have a lot of specificity. It is a zoning bylaw. There are some exemptions for emergency lighting and so forth. Because it is a zoning bylaw, it is complaint-driven. And so in the 25 years that this has been on the books, I have maybe on one hand, that's the number of times I've reported to the building commissioner that something was egregiously bad and maybe needed to be fixed. I have certainly not been the lighting police for the town of Chelmsford. Next one, please. But a lot has changed in that 25 years, and principally it is the development of a once-in-a-multi-generational change in how we light the night, and that is LEDs. They have been, it's a tremendous technology in a lot of ways, most notably because they deliver a lot of light, a lot of lumens for very few watts. And so consequently, they've been embraced. The problem is that any LED that has been installed in the town, either on a residence or on a business, has been installed since our original bylaw was in place. And I can tell you that there's been widespread disregard for this basic concept of pointing them down. People think that if they put an LED on the side of a building and blast it out sideways to light every corner of their property or parking lot, that they're doing a good thing. That's not the case. What has happened in addition is that we have learned a lot about lighting science in that time. We know two things that I want to point out tonight, that glare is especially bad. That is to say, when you see that light shining on you, it inhibits your ability to see well in the darkness. And the second thing is that LEDs generate a lot of blue wavelengths, which are ubiquitously bad for every aspect of the nighttime environment. For plants, for people, for nocturnal creatures, for sky glow, it all points back to the blue wavelengths of light. So, and in particular, there is demonstrated harm to humans from bad light. The circadian disruption has been shown to be a probable cancer cause. So there's a lot that has gone on. So what I did was I worked with many, many stakeholders to develop the bylaw that you see. I consulted 2 lighting professionals. I checked in with every major stakeholder in town. And so you can see there that, I want to just point out, if I can back up there, right there. This is, when I'm talking about glare, this is not light that is above horizontal, that's in this slice of the distribution that's just below horizontal. You know glare when you see it. You've seen it from bright headlights. You've seen it coming around a corner and having a wall pack from a business hit you in the eye, especially if you're a senior. I know none of you are seniors, but if you were, you would know that as you get older, this becomes a bigger problem. Glare is a big, big problem for seniors. And so we want to try to attack the glare. This is not in Chelmsford. This is, I want to show you, this is a really bad example of glare. This is from a school on Nantucket. And all they did, you can see how your ability to see is compromised here. And what they did was they took those very same lights and simply pointed them down, and the next slide shows the result. It is a dramatic change. And I'd submit that a lot of the lighting that has been installed here in town in the last quarter century could be made to be compliant just by turning it down, pointing it down. So let's get into the details. One more detail of what I proposed, this notion of color temperature. That is, it's a way to use a temperature in Kelvin to approximate the color of the light that's coming out of the bulb. The higher the temperature, the bluer the bulb. Just as a gauge, our street lights that were installed about 12 years ago have a color temperature of 4,000 Kelvin. This bylaw calls for 2,700 Kelvin, which is somewhat warmer. An example of that is the lighting that exists in the Chelmsford Plaza parking lot and now in the Summer Street Plaza parking lot. That is 2,700 Kelvin. It's very pleasant. It does a good job of illuminating. And just to be clear, a change in color temperature is not the same as a change in brightness. You can, the lumens, the term lumens determines how bright it is. Color temperature is just what color it is. And in fact, color temperature is now something that is available on every bulb that you buy in a store. So it is a common concept that's being embraced by the lighting industry. So what our bylaw calls for is a couple of things. First of all, and most foremost, is that I'm proposing, and we have proposed, to replace the zoning bylaw, which allows grandfathering of pre-existing non-conforming fixtures, with a general bylaw that would now make all of those any existing lighting that doesn't conform would be non-conforming, and there'd be a 10-year period to bring that into compliance. Another reason for a general bylaw is that it would embrace both municipal lighting and also utility lighting. Anyone who's gone down Chelmsford Street knows that there are very many spotlights that are attached to utility poles that try to illuminate a parking lot for a business that are owned by National Grid, and those would be captured by a general bylaw as well. One other thing that would be very novel in this framework would be I would have to say for every lighting bylaw that exists, compliance is the Achilles heel and enforcement. And so I'm proposing to have a designated lighting standards officer. That could be somebody from the building commissioner's office. It could be a contracted lighting professional for difficult situations, or in your case, when you have a complicated development that comes before you and you want to make sure that the lighting plan that's being submitted is conforming, then the cost for that would be borne by the developer in that case. In terms of the standards, there are more numbers in this one than there were in the other one. We would ask that not only that above a certain brightness that bulb be fully shielded, but we also talk about limiting the amount of light on a given property, and in particular, limiting the amount of light allowed to go over the property line through a measurement, something called foot candles, that can be measured. This would be a new way to prevent somebody from shining a very strong light into their neighbor's window. There would be a standard for that. It would set a color temperature, as I mentioned, of 2,700 Kelvin. There would be certain situations where we defer to the standards set by the Illuminating Engineering Society, or the IES, which is the national standard setting organization for this. The number of exemptions would be expanded to include things like sports lighting. None of this was covered in the original bylaw. The exemptions would be much more specific. But on the other hand, there would be some new standards that maybe no one ever thought of before. Things like landscape lighting, lighting on facades, on buildings, string lighting in a bar, outdoor bar situation. Not so much a problem here in Chelmsford, but in a lot of communities, residences put up string lighting that just annoys the heck out of their neighbors. And so this would be a way to control that. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Any questions, comments from the board?
I like the string lightings on my neighbor's yard.
I'm sorry?
I didn't realize string lighting was a problem. I kind of like it.
Just to be clear, you can have string lighting.
Oh, okay, good.
But it can't be above a certain brightness, and it has to be abide by a curfew.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, then I'm good.
I have a question for Evan, actually. How does this, if this goes, if the town votes for this, and we have applicants that come before us, typically there's a lighting page. The applicants then are going to be required to comply with this bylaw. Okay. And so then we would be evaluating their compliance with the bylaw, which may involve depending on the situation, may involve our needing to hire somebody that can do that assessment with regards to the bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, what council's indicated in his legal review, which is why in Article 30 he removed, which is the zoning article, he removed Section B. His guidance and advice to the town is that it is only the lighting standards officer who can make formal and legal determinations of compliance. The planning board, as part of your regulatory process, can provide that review. And then the lighting standards officer presumably would refer to it in order to determine compliance. So the board isn't necessarily being asked, as you are now, to ensure compliance. The council has indicated as part of your regular review, your submission requirements still require the applicant to submit a lighting plan for your site plan submission requirements, and that you can initiate peer review. Essentially, at that point, the lighting standards officer presumably wouldn't need to do peer review.
Okay.
Am I allowed to amplify that? One of the things that happens is you see a lighting plan in an architectural plan, and what happens when you finally get to turn on the lights can be very different. Contractors, I know this is going to come as a shock to you, but contractors don't always follow the instructions. And so one of the things that the lighting standards officer would be charged with is making sure that what's in the plan that comes before you, and then you sign off on that, ends up being installed and ends up being the correct amount.
So we would be looking at a number of things, presumably. I mean, I'm used to seeing that page that shows, the matrix of just what the, I guess it's lumens or I don't know. I had never actually checked to see what it was. But then we would also be looking at, are these the right acceptable fixtures, and are these, are we also going to be, we wouldn't in a plan actually be looking at how they're mounted, I presume.
No, so again,
I'm just trying to get a sense of what's the level at which we're going to be doing.
Council's indicating that you don't need to do a full lighting review, like as you currently do, because this bylaw is clearly indicating that it is the sole responsibility, the primary responsibility of the lighting standards officer to ensure compliance. However, not every project some projects go before the planning board, so I think procedurally it makes sense for the planning board to try to do that review to the maximum extent feasible, and that can include a peer review.
But we've seen in other cases in other projects where if we can't do that analysis, we do the peer review. But then as projects go on, we're a little stuck in terms of, well, if we've done it for this project, we should be doing it for this project. Should we standardize on either a peer review or not for this lighting plan?
The way Kelly's explained it to me, and I think to others, is that it's kind of based upon the complexity of the project.
Okay.
Or the sensitivity of the project. And I can't tell you exactly what a complex or sensitive lighting plan would be. Maybe we can, continue to have the assistance of Kelly and others to help us. But I can also say that I don't think there's no one within the building department right now who has the expertise. So even if the planning board didn't exist, the existing staff would likely need to peer review almost every project. And we may need to figure out some sort of standardized, sliding scale as to how certain types of projects are handled. It may be over time with Kelly's assistance, some training, maybe some of the simpler projects, smaller projects don't need to be peer reviewed.
Okay.
But anything that came before our planning board and that triggered a zoning approval, I mean, those likely will need to be peer reviewed.
And if I may, if you had a particularly complex situation, my concept is that you could have that plan adjudicated by a lighting professional, and the cost for that would be borne by the proponent.
Right. And procedurally, that would presumably assist the lighting standards officer, because the planning board would have already done a peer review, and it would have been, the consultant would have deemed it compliant.
So if this passes at town meeting, we should probably soon after have a discussion about how to incorporate it into our procedures.
Yeah, because I think it's going to be a learning curve. I mean, because there's a certain number of things like stormwater, whatever, we have a sense of.
Yeah.
It's complicated, it's not
And
complicated,
that took
whatever.
decades to get to where we are.
It took a while, yeah. And so lighting is going to have to be a new thing.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions, comments? Before we
Kelly presented Article 29, which is the non-zoning bylaw. Article 30 is the actual zoning bylaw, which deletes the existing outdoor illumination zoning bylaw in its entirety, and then just has a section A. I'm scrolling to it right now.
And if I may, the pre-existing bylaw had a whole section on sign lighting. And that was in conflict with the sign bylaw, which had lighting added to it. So one of the things that I tried to do was remove any signage issues from this new one so that there would be the proper separation of those two.
Yep.
And why is there, why do we have to have this person, what do we call him, the lighting?
Compliance
Yeah, lines, I mean, considering that we cut two heads from.
Well, someone's got to enforce it, and I believe without an actual person, it would fall to the building commissioner.
Right, that's what I'm, again, we just cut two heads, and next year doesn't look any better.
If I
And
may,
we're making
this
something
doesn't
very
require you to
complex.
hire anybody.
Well, it's a lot of extra work to make it, this is very, very detailed, right? And
But it's work that technically should be done now anyway with the current bylaw, just in a different way.
this is a lot more specific,
Yeah.
a lot more specific.
Makes
And
it
we're-
easier to
I mean,
enforce.
maybe this is not the right forum, maybe the FinCom will be the right forum for this discussion. But considering that we had to cut two the heads this year, this is a lot more work. I'm not opposed to, in theory, having some regulations around lighting, but the enforcement of this concerns me, and how detailed and, I went back and we read our current zoning bylaw, and I'm like, all right, this seems reasonable to me, at this point today,
Well, Well, I think you got two things here. One is determination that a new project is being put together in a compliant way. And that we do to some degree now by looking at the lighting plans. The second is enforcement down the road, should somebody be concerned that, that some lights violate the bylaw. I think that's somewhat separate. The first, I think in part, we can even put on the proponent of a project, if it's a large enough project. We can get them, if I understand correctly, Evan, we can get them to pay for the analysis, essentially peer review.
Yes, section 7.2
Yeah,
codifies
exactly.
that.
And so we're okay with the new projects. It's stuff that's been out there for a while, or people that backslide.
Right,
That's
or the
different.
person who wants to add an addition to their house, or wants to do something different. I mean, as, like, someone who's not a lighting person,
Yeah.
I look at this and I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. As a citizen, I'm like, well, I have no idea if I'm compliant or not. No one's complained about my lights. Like, I don't put a lot of lights on, but like,
Right, but Anita, that exists today with the current bylaw.
Yeah.
It's just a different level of compliance.
right, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know, this seems like a lot. It seems like I'd rather just,
One of the, if I may, one of the things that made the original bylaw unenforceable was that it was so vague. It didn't have a lot of specificity to it. And what I can tell you, and you can probably prove to yourself just going around town, there has been widespread disregard for that bylaw, because not everybody comes before you when they want to put an addition on their house, or they want to slap a security light in their backyard. They just do it. And so part of what I am hoping for in this is a group consciousness raising attitude adjustment, if you will, to encourage people to do the right thing. I've had multiple discussions with the Chelmsford Business Association, who is, they're completely sympathetic to this. This 10-year sunset period would allow most businesses, within that period of time, they're probably going to change their lights anyway. And so they will simply put in the right lights in place of their wrong lights now at some point down the road. How we certify that that happens, I think we've kind of come around to this, that if it's a simple project, we'll be able to know if it's the right lighting or not, if it's a few lights. If it's a complex project, like a Walmart or something like that coming into town, or a large development, that would be when you trigger a professional review, not by me, by the way, to make sure that not only is the lighting plan that's presented correct, but that the installation is correct.
And I also think that we should be putting forward clear guidance. How and when we enforce it is a different topic, that if there's not enough money to enforce it, doesn't mean we have to enforce it.
but every project that, like, anybody who's doing an addition needs to pull a permit, and that all falls on the building inspector, right? So if we have these guidelines, they're gonna have to make sure that this is being followed.
It's a worthwhile conversation for FinCom.
All right.
But just to
Building-
clarify, I think for purposes of compliance, section 7.2 clearly indicates that whether the demonstration of compliance is being done by the existing staff or new staff or the planning board, it can be, the peer review can be required and paid for by the proponent. As Mike indicated, enforcement is going to require some additional capacity. But that capacity is contemplated over a 10-year period. Because that's the sunset clause. But you're right, the spirit and intent of this bylaw, if town meeting passes it, is that it will be enforced. And that enforcement will require some additional capacity. That may be training of existing employees, or maybe over time hiring, a part-time employee or something.
I guess my point here is, I would like it to be a little bit less, a little bit more flexible, and
Well,
less complex.
That is
would
definitely a
be-
planning board
that would
discussion in
be,
the sense
that
that you're
would not
co-sponsoring the
require
article.
would not be, not require us having to hire additional people, because, again, we're gonna.
I would like to chime in that I don't think anyone's proposing hiring any people. I personally, as someone who's sitting at my kitchen table, looking across the my backyard and the wetlands to bright lights shining in my face from the liquor store on Summer Street. I'm very excited by the general tone of this, that you point your lights down and you use warm light and you buy a lower strength light bulb. I mean, that seems like great from a like stewardship and good neighbor standpoint to me. I also think the 10-year sunset clause has left plenty of room for people who aren't ready to do the change now, to do it over time. I mean,
But that's what
I
our
think
current
that
bylaws.
LEDs have made it possible for us to do something like this in a fiscally responsible way for new projects coming before us. So I don't really understand your.
Well, that's what our current bylaw says, right? Our current bylaw says that, right? Like, you know.
No, it
point
doesn't
down.
say. This is making it much more specific.
Okay.
So it's like a modernization of the
Yeah.
first generation lighting bylaw.
Yeah.
And I think the sunset clause, the 10 years, pushes out that enforcement to
Yeah.
really 10 years from now.
With a little bit of luck, by then everybody will have replaced the lights anyway.
Yeah.
And the enforcement problem won't be nearly
I think
as
most
big.
of the burden is going to be on new projects and on us with this, because new projects are going to have to comply. And
But with the new technology, it's not going to cost them anymore. They're just going to have to use a plan that follows these guidelines.
But I think most of the complaints and the retroactive work that the building commissioner would have to deal with is not going to be needed until closer to 10 years from now.
When is it scheduled to go before FinCom?
Next week?
No, FinCom's next meeting is the 13th, the week after.
The week after the 13th?
No, whatever, the
13th.
13th.
The reason
I don't
I-
know, but
The day after our
whatever-
next
if
meeting.
that's
The reason
if
I
it-
ask, is the board inclined to keep this open until, after FinCom, or,
My guess is that they'd want us to
good point.
Yeah.
weigh in first and then have their discussion.
it would-
They usually do.
FinCom usually likes the planning board's recommendation.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I'm prepared to take a position on it.
I would like to get public input too, so if no one has any other questions or comments, we can take public input. Anyone from the public? Or Paul?
I appreciate what Paul Cohen, town manager, I appreciate what Kelly's doing, and I admire his passion for this. My concern is the implementation of it and the enforcement of it. Yeah, you say it's 10 years for compliance, but it's not 10 years. It's going to be 10 weeks, because any new fixture that goes in during that period is subject to the standards of the law. So how is the building commissioner or the lighting standards officer going to know, after a period of time, what's new and what's old out there? So it's not, we don't have to do anything for 10 years. It's going to be gradual as it goes in. The bigger concern I have, though, is the enforcement of it. Lighting is on at night. All of our inspectors work during the day. So now what are we going to say to the building commissioner or the lighting standards officer or so forth? Oh, go out, well, like today, it's not even March yet, and it doesn't get dark till 5:30, 6:30. We're going to turn the clocks ahead in 2 weeks, and then it gets light at 6 in the morning. And then, as you know, as we get to June, it doesn't get dark till 9 o'clock. So when the complaints come in from the neighbors or whatever over the thousands of properties that we own, how are we going to compensate that person? You know what the standard is. If somebody comes in during off hours, it's usually a 4-hour minimum or maybe a 2-hour minimum. How many nights a week are we going to expect this person or persons to go out? Because you know it's going to happen. We have people come to the select board complain about out-of-state license plates. You don't think we're gonna have people come to the select board or to my office saying, my neighbors put in a floodlight for security reasons and it doesn't comply? And therefore, what's the lighting standards officer doing about it? And then we're gonna have to send him or her out to do it. And if you look at the bylaw, the appeals are coming to you. Because if they're not satisfied with the lighting standards officer under this bylaw, they're coming to the planning board.
Yeah.
So I appreciate, and I'd like it too. I like dark skies. In fact, I really appreciate it. It's better for the wildlife, it's better for humans, it's everything else. But my concern is, any bylaw we have to be able to enforce it, because if we don't enforce it, we're gonna get vilified as a community for not enforcing the laws that we have on. But then the other problem is trying to enforce it is gonna be very costly in terms of time and commitment to people. And the problem is if the inspector goes out on a Tuesday night, well, that means he's gonna take comp time or overtime on a Thursday or Friday for the workload that's significant. So I admire what's going on here. I'm just concerned about whether it's going to be enforceable and reasonable for the town to be able to do this when it gets into effect.
How do other towns, your colleagues, other towns have a lighting policy at all? And if they do, how do they enforce it?
I'm not aware of any community having a standard to
community.
this level. Every community has lighting standards per their zoning bylaws and so
Right.
forth. And as you can tell, that oftentimes there isn't a great enforcement or adherence to that. But this is bringing it up to another level, which I admire and I appreciate. I just don't know if it's going to be achievable to the point where it's, how are we going to be adjudicating it when we have, we have over 10,000 single-family homes, and now if you have ADUs and other things, and neighbors are closer to each other and everything else, I'm just concerned about the issues in terms of how it's going to be effectively implemented in terms of enforcement by a lighting standards officer, because it's not just a 10-year wait. How are we going to, how are you going to keep track of what's going on in the meantime? Or the other problem is the neighbor turns the fixture down, 3 weeks later, they turn it back up, or change it. You know how people they get stubborn on both sides. And that's the concern I have is, I admire this, I want to see this done. I'm just concerned about the ability to enforce the standards.
Mike?
I want to make a point here. The light doesn't have to be on for most of this stuff to be determined. You can tell whether the thing points down. There are certain pieces of this having to do with when a light ought to be turned out, which I will admit are going to have to be observed at night. But I think a great deal of this can be determined at noon.
Mike, you know how it works. What they're going to say is, just like it is now, you come out here in the dark and see what it's like, right? It's not going to be, you can see what it is in the daytime. They're going to want the inspector out there.
Somebody's going to want you to go there, but they're wanting you to go there. Doesn't mean you have to.
Well, yeah, but then they'll complain that you
How are you
didn't
going to
come out.
evaluate? How are you going to evaluate the light? If the string light, if it's over the maximums, unless you're out there
Now
looking at it at night.
yeah, there are some things you would need to be there and
Exactly.
see of at night, but there are a great number of things.
Sure. I'm not. Yeah. Well. Yeah. You can go to the Walmart and see the fixture. I'm
Yeah,
not doubting
exactly.
that. That's not what's concerning me. I'm not concerned about the Walmart or the Summer Street plazas.
Yeah, I
I'm
hope-
more
I
concerned
hope we
about
don't
the.
have to be
I'm more
concerned about
concerned about the single-family residential issues that are going to come up in neighborhoods where with the lighting that's going to be out there, because we have it with noise. We've gone to those issues with noise complaints. And out there with the decibel meters and everything else, and now you're introducing the light complaints, which I think is much more prevalent than the noise.
My question, though, is we have lighting bylaws in place now that need to be enforced. How do we enforce them? We don't.
And I think this is where Kelly is his starting point. He's acknowledging that historically, lighting in Chelmsford has not been treated the same way as other zoning violations. And that's likely a community value, which is not isolated to Chelmsford. So I think that's one of Kelly's primary interest in elevating it. And this is a new mechanism of elevating it.
Yeah.
He's also indicated that it's not currently common in suburban communities. But if the town is interested in trying to elevate lighting compliance modernized standards, modern technology, elevated compliance and enforcement. You could do that through zoning, but this is a stronger mechanism, and Kelly's clearly indicated that why this is the stronger mechanism.
And I get that. And at the same time, we currently have lighting bylaws in place that are not enforced.
They're enforced on a case-by-case basis, complaint-driven, just like
Yeah.
Kelly indicated. We don't get a lot of complaints, as Kelly's indicated as well. As I indicated to you, if town meeting chooses to adopt this, I think it sends a very clear message, which is, I think was what Paul's expressing as a concern. To bring this full circle, when this originally, I think Kelly can attest to this, one of the first areas of concern that was expressed across the board, planning board staff, was the inclusion of single-family houses within the bylaw. As currently drafted, it still requires compliance with single-family homes. And that's obviously a significant burden, and that's where the sensitivity related to abutter complaints, much of the after-hour enforcement would be related or associated with single-family properties. So that's likely the biggest new burden or required capacity associated with the bylaw.
Like,
There's
I'd be more
10,000
comfortable-
single-family properties in town.
Like, I'd be more comfortable if this was just on the commercial, right, to, because that makes, if we excluded the single-family homes, I would be a little bit more comfortable with that, because I think that's less burdensome. It does come, most of those will come through the planning board, we can apply these standards. I think that, that's the issue I have with this.
Well, given how many single-family houses there are in Chelmsford, it would seem to me that to put an exclusion in like that would essentially gut the law from a practical point of
And
view.
Kelly's indicated that.
Yeah, just gut it. I mean, 95% of the light around town would be exempt.
Well, what's the problem light? The problem lights are from the commercial.
No, I
pieces.
think the problem,
But we
the problem is overall. We see it in a bigger chunk when we have a commercial project.
Right, but those can be complaint-driven
Yeah.
and handled
Right.
on a case-by-case basis, because we do have that in our bylaw, that they shouldn't be shining in someone else's yard, they should be pointed down. We already have that already in
Well,
there.
I think this offers more detail as to what that means and is probably more
If it were
enforceable,
just
ultimately.
isolated to downward lighting shielded,
Mm-hmm.
the current bylaw would suffice. But as I understand the proposal, it codifies light temperature and
Right.
brightness, the modernization of the illumination technology, which the current bylaw doesn't.
Right, and again, like, the purpose for, like, residents is, I just don't want this blaring light coming in my living room, right? Like, like, it, like, to me, like, I just want a mechanism to call up someone and say, hey, my next door neighbor's flashing a spotlight into my family room, right? Like, that's really burdensome, I don't want that. I'm not so sure I really care about the color or, or the temperature.
I guess I'm just confused as to why this would create more complaints than we currently have now.
I can tell you, in Virginia, Ryan, the most prominent complaint we had was a few years ago was the Radisson signs.
Right.
Across the way, and that was addressed. We went out there, it all got resolved. The concern I have is the residential aspect of it, is that, the idea that light is trespassing across the boundary line into their property, which again, can't be known unless it's at night, and those type of things, which are totally different than going to a commercial Walmart or to Radisson and seeing, are they adhering to the standard? I think that's the big concern that I have.
But technically, our current bylaw applies to single-family
Right.
It
dwellings
does,
too.
It does, but the community values and how zoning has been evolved over the years, and there's no mechanism, and there's also no community sentiment to apply it to single family.
So, but why would that change with
Because
this bylaw?
This
This is very
bylaw is very
specific.
specific.
Of course it is,
It's-
but it helps.
And to answer your question, it introduces a notion of nuisance lighting. The current bylaw is really silent on nuisance lighting. So if you introduce new terminology related to compliance and enforcement, it's logical to assume that there's going to be increases in complaints.
I disagree with
If
that.
I may, the existing bylaw applies to all properties, single-family including. Let me read from it. Here's the part that is squishy and vague. If a spot or floodlight luminaire rated at 1,000 lumens or less is directed or focused such as to cause direct light to be cast toward residential buildings on adjacent property or nearby land, or to create glare perceptible to persons operating motor vehicles, the luminaire shall be redirected or its light output controlled as necessary to eliminate such conditions. That's in the existing bylaw.
Right.
It applies to everybody. But it's completely unenforceable because it's so vague. And that is what we're coming, that's why we're coming. When, right now, if somebody complained to the building commissioner about their neighbor's spotlight, they'd still have to go out at night to try to rectify it. That's not changed, Paul, I'm sorry. And they'd have no way to determine whether an actual transgression was occurring or not because there's no specificity. So everyone goes away unhappy. You know,
No, because the guy can say,
standards-
I agree,
standards-
this is kind of going into
No,
here.
there's no
complicated
standard.
standards get changed all the time in the building code, in the plumbing code, in the electrical code, and they're to most people, those are not overt, they're not visible because the building inspector and the contractors take care of that. There's a gaping hole there. There's gaping holes for like noise pollution, or if somebody's water is running amok, because those are not really covered by the building code. This is one of those situations that's not covered by building code, and that's why it's up to local bylaws like this to fill that void. But I just want to be clear, the existing bylaw applies to single-family homes too. I will also mention that there are some circuit breakers, for lack of a better word, for the single-family homes. If you've got a bright spotlight and you want to keep that bright spotlight, you can do that, but you have to put it on a motion sensor. There's places in here that I've built in wiggle room for especially residential property owners to be able to keep what they've got. I'm not going after, I'm not going after their porch lights. I would go after all-night security lights that are really bright and shining in Deirdre's, in her bedroom. There are many situations I have heard where developers have put up really bright lights to the point that they are obnoxiously affecting residential. And the developers say, put up light blocking shades in your house.
I don't disagree, again, I don't disagree with that. I just think this is a little too much, from my personal.
All right.
Don't disagree on the developer side of it, new commercial, I get that, but I just think this is a little too much.
Okay. Are there any other, Casey?
I'd just like to ask a quick question, and maybe I missed this part of the discussion, but on the peer review part, it says, proponent may be required to pay for third-party review services to be utilized only where the lighting standards officer and/or planning board does not have the equipment or expertise to evaluate. If there's a complaint against a single-family home and the town currently doesn't have staff, does the owner of that single-family home, because it does say regarding that it would be the owner of the property shall have the burden, is the single-family home going to be forced to pay for a peer review of the lighting? How is that going to go? I just don't want, my house, I put up a floodlight, it's in compliance, but now I have to pay for a peer review to prove that type of thing. How does that get worked in, enforced? Who decides when the peer review is required? Is that building, is that being brought to the planning board for discussion? That's my question.
I would think that might be the planning board.
If it's in front of the planning board, the planning board can hire third-party peer review.
I'm
to
asking specifically
demonstrate
about
compliance.
a
But you're not gonna be
complaint
dealing
against a
with
single-family
single-family.
house.
So single-family, it's going to be, the determination is going to be initially made by the lighting standards officer.
Right.
I'm saying, it says if there isn't a lighting standards officer or anybody with the capacity
Right,
or
so that'd be an
equipment.
existing employee as
So,
designated.
right.
And that position will make that determination.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is sooner rather than later, initial training will likely take place, particularly for single family, if it's included in the bylaw. I think single family is likely an area that is more straightforward than other areas.
I just don't know if there's going to be an overlap from when this goes in until there's the training provided to either a town employee or someone hired with that experience.
Yeah, it's
to
gonna,
where there may
would
be
It would
complaints.
be a period of transition where the town would have to build its capacity, and that's going to take time.
This is only gonna get enforced by complaints.
No.
This, you
Residential
would,
families are not gonna go change their lights to agree to the bylaw unless they're forced to.
if you install a spotlight on the side of your house, a security light, you don't have to have the lighting standards officer certify that when you install it. Where that would be triggered is if your neighbor decides that your light is a nuisance. All right, and you know that basically exists now. And so what I've tried to do is to create a formalism, a procedure, a set of pathways to allow that ascertainment to happen and a resolution to be achieved. All right, and I think you're right in the sense that if you put up a light that is non-conforming and you know it's non-conforming and your neighbor complains, shouldn't you have the burden to make it a conforming light?
Kelly?
Kelly should be addressing
Kelly,
the chair.
could you address us?
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. I apologize. So, broadly what I just said, if just the installation of a light at a residence does not trigger a visit by the lighting enforcement officer, it's only when a complaint is registered. And when that complaint is registered, the lighting enforcement officer, during the daytime, can easily see whether that light is pointed down or not, can easily check the lumen output of the bulb to see if that's conforming. That's all during the daytime. I'm actually imagining that maybe the electrical inspector would be the most logical person for this to fall to, but that's not my decision. I think a lot of these things can be determined at the daytime. And again, it gets escalated to, you know, a lighting professional only when a resolution can't be reached. And that is a step that hasn't existed in the past. And I have to say, you know, the status quo has not worked very well. And our town has, despite the fact that it's had a outdoor lighting ordinance, there are scores of businesses and countless homes that don't satisfy the existing ordinance, the existing bylaw. And so I've tried to find a pathway to claw that back, if for no other reason, to appeal to people's sense of community, their sense of doing the right thing.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
To Casey's question, that I don't think that the town staff would hire a peer review, right? Yeah, I mean, they would.
The building commissioner or lighting standards officer would have the legal ability to hire a peer review consultant.
Okay.
But I wouldn't expect most single-family cases would require
Agreed.
it.
As Kelly's indicating, that's likely a daytime visit to look at 2 or 3, 4, you know, performance standards.
And
So the issue, I think, the issue is there enough capacity based upon how many potential complaints are going to come in?
Well, I think that's a separate issue.
Yeah,
I
right.
think the technical issue,
Yes.
given the standards that we have in this new bylaw, and given the manufacturer's information that they have available, I can't imagine most single-family cases would require a special peer reviewer. No. I would think that most inspectors would be able to handle that pretty easily. Okay, Nancy, it looks like you would like to speak?
Yeah, Nancy Arroway, 65 Littleton Road. Sorry, guys, I've been sitting in the back listening to this, and it's just kind of driving me crazy. So,
Driving us crazy, too.
yeah, really. My concern is applying this to residences. the existing bylaws do apply to residences, and they get applied for, arc lights. But this ends up applying it to all the lights that are, all the outdoor lights at the residence. And I really think that's overregulation. The problem is, when you apply this detail of a standard for a commercial industrial property, the person dealing with compliance is an expert. You've got engineering involved, and they understand this stuff. When you start applying it in a household, yeah, there's some of us that are engineers and we do understand it, but the fact is most people don't. Everything I've heard here refers to installing a light at a residence. But the fact is, this compliance comes down to changing a light bulb. Because a light bulb has a lumen rating, and it has a color temperature. And you change that light bulb, you're in or out of compliance. And you tell me how the average homeowner is going to deal with being able to comply with something that's this detailed. So I think applying it at the household level is simply opening us up to a lot of work, a lot of animosity, through a lot of complaints. And I think it's the wrong thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually don't agree with that take. I think that the current bylaw does apply to it says all outdoor lighting. So anything in the new bylaw that we're proposing is technically covered by the current bylaw. Doesn't do it very well, because any complaints that would arise from the new bylaw would be covered by this current bylaw. The problem is that no one knows what it means. So anyone can complain, but no one can resolve it because the standards are not there. It's completely open to interpretation. So I don't think it's going to create any more complaints. I actually think it'll make the complaints that do get that raised easier to resolve, because they're objective standards that can be read on a new bulb box, or the bulb itself, actually. And I think that, yes, while it may be triggered by a changing of a new bulb, unless it impinges on someone else's property, it's not going to get a complaint. And if it would get a complaint under the new bylaw, it would likely get a complaint under the old bylaw. So
I got to agree completely with Chris. And I think you're much, much better off having clear standards than having fuzzy standards. Fuzzy standards can be abused, and people sometimes abuse them. Clear ones, even if you get abuse, you can get resolution fairly quickly. And I would agree, most of the time, nobody's going to check this beyond, is the light shining down, and is it so large that it could light up a football field? That's about the level that it's going to reach when you're dealing with single-family homes. And we don't have the problem now. I don't think we would have it with a new law.
I think we have to be careful too, because from a town standpoint, when you're dealing with a lot of residents, I think everybody at this table tries to be rational. You have to remember that.
Thank you.
We all, but many times in town government, we encounter neighbors that have deep-rooted animosity towards one another, and they're not coming from a rational standpoint. They just want to aggravate or agitate their neighbor. And so that's why I think we don't want to be drawn into that situation. Right.
So do you think that this would help that or enhance that?
I mean, hearing that I could tell you again, I don't want to bring finance, knowing that we are reducing staff it doesn't sound like we have the capacity in the inspector's office currently to do that, or the knowledge. We'd have to do training. Those are some of my main concerns. I think you're putting the inspections department in a bad position in that if town meeting votes for this and enacts these new standards, are we going to have to contract with a lighting compliance officer? I'm just trying to see how this all comes together. Because if we don't have if we don't have the in-house knowledge to do it, it's going to take resources either through a contractor or someone else to, I'm not saying that I don't necessarily see it being a 40-hour-a-week position, but it may be pretty intense with single-family homes.
I think we could have, I think there could have been something done that would have been in the middle between maybe making our current bylaw a little bit tighter to this extreme. And I agree with Nancy, which is a rarity, so I want to put that on the record, that Nancy and I agree on this. And Mike disagrees, which is even, we should, I'm just saying.
I agree with Mike.
Yes, I know, so this is just changed the whole dynamic, but I just think there could have been something a little bit not as extreme. So I'm not comfortable with this as presented.
So I think if I were going to have a feud with my neighbor, I would not want this new bylaw, because I think it would be easier for me to
Harass them.
harass the neighbor with the old bylaw, because there's no way to easily enforce it. So I can keep complaining, and there can never be a resolution. Whereas in the new one, it's going to be settled pretty quickly, I think, with the current
No.
standards. But I think that the old bylaw just, I think, creates a lot of problems that don't get resolved, whereas the new bylaw covers the same exact things. It just provides an easier mechanism for us to deal with lighting plans up front, and it also provides a mechanism where resolution can be sought pretty quickly with standards.
So I'll make a couple of just comments here. I think in my impression, when Kelly started this, I thought it was commercial properties only that we were focusing on. As mentioned, driving around town, you see the string lights. I was under the impression that we were addressing the commercial only. And I think the average person in residential doesn't know what lumens are, and they don't know what wattage they have on the light bulbs. And if you're going to test the lumen output during the day, you need to have that information. People don't keep their information of the bulbs that are in there on the side of the house. They're out. They get trashed out.
It's on the bulb.
We're going to go get a ladder and go up and check it when the inspector comes, because you're going to look at that and you're going to pull it down. You can do that. Okay. But I think I've been wrong about town meeting before, right? Every time I think they're going to approve, I don't think they'll approve, right? And then they don't approve it, right? Yeah. So, but I think when you start to talk about personal property and controlling what's happening on personal property, I think you'll have a big pushback from town meeting on this.
That may be true.
Commercial, I understand it, and understanding so that we can, when it comes to a meeting here, the engineers can meet the requirements that have been put forth regarding the lumens and the requirements. I think residential, I think you're going into a gray area that people don't want control. They don't want government in their houses.
And I agree with you, except our current bylaw provides that mechanism.
I agree, but it
And it
allows-
currently controls it.
But what Kelly talked about, it's turning the light down. You pull the light down, but it's not controlling what lumens is in the light bulb. It's stop shining it in your neighbor's yard. That's in the law now, not the bulb wattage.
Actually, brightness is in there. It just doesn't say how bright.
Right. So, but again, that's,
And that's open to interpretation.
Open
Your
to
brightness may not
interpretation.
be my
Correct,
brightness.
but we're putting it in here
Yeah.
as what the brightness should be.
and that's where the government overreach.
Now you're
Yeah.
telling your neighbor what they should do, and I think that crosses the line. So that's why I was all for this, and I appreciate Kelly on his vacation and traveling and doing all this work. This is a phenomenal article. I just think if it was just commercial, then I would be all for it. Now that it's going into residential and we dive more further into it and it's all about residential, I think you're gonna have a big pushback on town meeting.
So the question I would have, if we did want to shift it to only commercial, how would we do that? because our current bylaw does both. So we would have to really figure out two sets of bylaws. One completely nebulous, do whatever you want for residential, and we would still have to change the current one.
I wouldn't say do whatever you want, follow the bylaw you have in
Right,
place
don't
now.
bother
But you
your
can't,
neighbor.
because that applies to commercial and residential.
But then split this to the commercial
Commercial.
part. You can control more commercial. They're coming into town, they've got experts at their table, they can meet those criterias. I think it's gonna be very hard for residential. And if you've got two neighbors that don't get along, you are just adding fuel to the fire.
Yep.
And it's gonna be coming in front of the planning board for determination.
Yep.
So you're gonna have a lot more angry people throwing stuff at you.
Yeah,
But no,
I'm like-
that's just, I
like-
mean, I'm just trying to make a laugh there, but.
I mean,
it's
I'm
just
looking
that-
at some of these fixtures here, and I have no idea if I even have, I think I have this on my house. Like, do I have that? Like,
That's in the ground, yeah.
but this is the ground, but this is my little light. Like, I
All
just
right,
spent like $500.
we do need
on
to keep moving.
But my point is, if I don't, I'm sitting here, right, like, trying to this, I don't even know what I have and what I don't
Joel's the
have.
voice of reason. Let's say Joel.
Casey, did you want to say something?
I just add something quickly. I think, and I don't know if this is a perspective they actually want to hear, but from the design standpoint, where I usually am, clear bylaws are very good for commercial properties. So I would fully endorse and agree with clarifying and putting clear standards on lighting designs that you want to see from us on our side, because, you know, I don't design the lighting that I provide to the boards. I ship it off to a lighting manufacturer, and being able to provide them clear guidelines will actually help us. Again, the concern lies more in the residential area, so I just wanted to add that.
All right, we need to wrap this one up.
You want to let it simmer to the 12th, or are you going to?
I don't think anything's gonna change.
Your voice of reason.
How did that happen? Well, I was just going to say that I think it's a very solid bylaw. It does improve the bylaw. What we're really discussing are things that I think are sort of above our level. I think the town needs to make the decision about weighing, you know, the improvements that this bylaw could bring with the potential downfalls, including the economic implications, which will be commented on by FinCom. I think we could certainly, whatever we vote, I mean, if I voted yes, I probably would vote yes, that I would recommend this bylaw, but with the caveat that there are known issues that the town needs to take into consideration when they decide on it. But the bylaw itself, I think, is very solid. So I think a lot of what we're discussing is really sort of beyond us, so to speak.
Any other closing thoughts? Kelly, any closing thoughts from you?
Only a very small fraction of the lighting that gets installed in this town comes before you. You have to understand that. There's a common adage in the lighting profession, which is very little lighting gets designed, most of it gets installed. When a local business wants to add security lighting, that doesn't come before you. There's no permit. It just happens. And so that is one of the reasons that we have the situation we're in now. I disagree to the connotation that this is mostly about residential. It is not. It's much more broad than just residential. It speaks a lot to commercial. It exempts 1- and 2-family houses from certain of the provisions in there. It allows someone with a bright security light in their backyard to allow them to keep that as long as they put it on a motion sensor, for example, or turn it down, point it down, for example. It also captures the lighting that's in the town, much of which is not very good. Not just the street lighting, but the area lighting around the municipal buildings and such. And it also captures the lighting that the utilities put in, which is some of the most egregiously bad. It's a very broad net. And so, because there are a lot of players involved here, the residential is really honestly the smallest part of this. And I'm sorry that you've latched onto that as the reason. No question, people are going to stand up at town meeting and say, Well, you're coming after my lights. No, I'm not coming after your lights. If your neighbor complains, then I'm coming after your lights, but not until that happens, just like now.
All right, so the folks who are leaning towards not supporting this, would there be anything, any changes or adjustments that could be made to sway you in the other direction?
Keep it to commercial. And I'm fine with the utilities, like, but keep it.
Okay. Kelly, would you be willing to have that change?
I think a lot of it would have to be rewritten, so I'd probably withdraw it from this town meeting.
Okay.
Then you'd also have to try to figure out what you're going to do now that you've taken a step backward, because your existing bylaw does cover residences, and now you're asking for a bylaw that doesn't cover residences. So now you've created a gap.
No, I would say
You would
Separate
say
it out.
just don't control residences?
not to this extent.
Well, I guess I'm perplexed.
Like-
You want residences to be covered,
want them to
but
be
not with any
shining-
kind of
No,
specificity?
I just don't want them shining their lights into someone else's yard. I don't want to
How
have
do you
to tell them what
quantify
about
that?
voltage. I don't want to have to tell them what kind of light. I don't want to tell them that you can't have this light, but you can have this light. I just want to tell them, like, hey, just be a good neighbor. If you're shining your light into someone else's yard, then the town will come out and will tell you not to do that.
But I don't think that's enforceable, and that's one of the issues that we're running into with this current bylaw. So,
I mean, Kelly, you get into the lighting of a residential of 10 minutes, that it can only be on for 10 minutes.
In order to retain the brightness of the light that you've got now.
But it doesn't say that.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't say the brightness of the light you got now.
It says non-conforming nuisance lights can remain in place, and a nuisance light is one that's shining across into your neighbor's yard, for example, if you put it on a motion sensor. I've got lighting around my house that I confess would not meet this bylaw.
Yeah, that's great.
But those lights in total are probably on for half an hour each year. They'd be fine. Part of what I'm trying to capture here is the homeowner who has a light on the side of their house, who wants to light their entire 1 acre backyard with a single bright light and leaves it on all night. That doesn't do anybody any good, including the homeowner, because it just shows the bad guys what they got in their backyard. I think you are, I think there is certainly a lot of non-compliance in commercial buildings, and for reasons I said, a lot of the lighting gets installed that is always under the radar. But there is as I talk to other towns that are trying to create bylaws just like this one, the principal complaint is neighbor on neighbor. And so in that sense, you've kind of gotten lucky that you haven't had more complaints than you've had. And I guess I just have to reiterate that the existing bylaw has always covered residences. And this gives a basis for quantifying the nature of the complaint. And, you know, when you buy a light bulb at a store, you don't just pick the one that's in front, you pick one that is the right brightness and the right shape for what you want. You pick it according to color temperature. It's called color temperature now, but it used to be cool white and warm white and all that, and you picked according to that.
Mm-hmm.
And now you
That's
pick
my choice. My choice is what color I want.
I understand that.
But in here, you're telling me what I need to have.
I understand that.
That crosses the line.
Okay. So if you want to renew, so for example, you were asking where we might, if you want to remove the color temperature requirement, that would be something you could do to at least as far as the residences. I mean,
I don't want you to pull this. I think it's a good discussion, and I think it should, we don't always go unanimous.
Right.
Yeah.
So take the vote the way it is, bring it to town. You've done a lot of work to this. Bring it to town meeting and hear what the residents have to say.
Yeah.
And if the
That's fair
residents
enough.
are all for this, by all means, I'm for it too. If the residents are not, then we modify it, and next year you come back.
Want Want to put it to a vote?
Are people comfortable with that?
Yep.
Kelly, are you comfortable with that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Are there any other folks who'd like to speak in public? I'll take a motion to close public hearing on this
Move to close
topic.
public hearing?
Second.
Motion by Mike, Anita second, and roll call. Deirdre?
Aye.
Joel?
That we explain that we recognize there are issues that are beyond our purview.
Wait, aren't
This
we
is
just
closing
voting on
public hearing.
I think we're just closing the hearing first.
Closing the hearing.
Yeah,
That's what that-
that and no fence, new fence. Thank you.
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
Aye.
Mike? And I'm an aye. Unanimous to close the public hearing. All right, I'll take a motion to recommend this article to town meeting.
I'll second. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I'll take a motion.
It's getting late.
I'll make a motion to recommend this article to town meeting.
Motion by Anita.
I'll second.
Second by Mike. Roll call. Deirdre?
I'm an aye.
Joel?
What I said before.
And new fence.
Mike?
No.
No. Anita?
No.
John?
No.
Aye.
And I am an aye.
So
4-3.
4-3.
Well, we should be prepared to discuss it at town meeting when people ask us about that. And you know,
Absolutely.
it's a good conversation to have.
All right.
That covered Article 29, the non-zoning bylaw.
Yes.
You think it's time maybe to just sort of declare victory for the
So,
night?
wait a minute, what do we have to do? We have to do,
General bylaw and floodplain should be very quick.
Thank you all very much. I
Thank you,
appreciate the
Kelly.
discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your work.
let's do the floodplain, real quick, get that done. And then,
And I feel bad that Paul's sitting
been
in the
here all
back for the 129.
No, you get 4 hour, remember, 4 hour minimum.
All right, let's plug ahead. Let's do the general bylaw and floodplain. I think those are going to be quick. And then we'll get to 129. We'll at least open the 129 and start it. All right. So let's do Article 31, the general zoning. Evan?
May I suggest, there's a piece here where we adjust the zoning based on the light thing that we're proposing.
Yes.
Why don't we get that out of the way?
Okay.
Because that's separate from our recommendation, I think. And I would imagine the vote would be the same, but I think technically we have to do that. Wouldn't you agree, Evan?
The zoning article?
Yeah, technically we
zoning
do have to do that one too.
That's within
All
our
right.
purview.
Yeah, so let's do that one. That is
Article 30.
Article 30.
Yeah.
All right, any public comment on that one? All right, I will
Close the
take
public
a
hearing?
motion to close the public hearing on that article.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Oh,
I was
I'll
almost-
second it.
Okay, I was almost going to second.
Anita, motion, second by Mike. Roll call, Deirdre?
Aye.
Joel?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Anita? John?
Aye.
Aye.
Mike? And I'm an aye. Unanimous to close the public hearing. I will take a motion to recommend Article 30.
I make a motion to recommend Article 30 as written.
Second.
Second by Mike. A motion by Anita. Roll call, Deirdre?
Aye.
Joel?
Aye.
Mike?
No.
Anita? John?
No.
Mike? And I am an aye. Same vote, 4-3.
Yep. Okay.
All right, thank you. Article 31. All right, so this came up after the Mass Attorney General Office reviewed our MBTA zoning review. They approved our MBTA zoning article, but they did find a few other areas of the bylaws that were potentially problematic and suggested we review them. Next slide, Evan. The summary of the potential issues are erosion control, possible conflicting languages, applying this requirement for special permits to as-of-right projects, waivers and consideration of fiscal impact, and specifically on school impacts, and then the definition of family. The town council did review these, And he found no changes were needed in erosion control. We do need to change remove the school impacts from the special permit impact considerations, since that has been declared by land court to be not of legitimate impact to be considered. And also, the definition of family is problematic that we currently have, and town council suggested that we adopt the Brookline definition as suggested by the Attorney General. So the next two slides actually show the specific changes, essentially on those two sections of the articles, removing the need for additional school facilities and specifically excluding public school system from the considerations. In the next section, the family definition, the actual dwelling definition needs to be changed to remove the word family, and they're really just dwelling units as opposed to family dwelling units. And then,
Nonprofit housekeeping unit.
yeah, this was the Brookline definition that was acceptable to.
And a lot of them didn't start out wanting to be nonprofit.
Yeah. So those are the recommended changes. Any questions, comments?
I think it's a slam dunk. And I will move accordingly.
Before we do, any public comments? Anything on Zoom, Evan?
No.
Okay.
Move to close the public hearing?
Second.
Mike moved to close the public hearing, second by Anita, and we'll do a roll call. Deirdre?
Aye.
Joel?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I am an aye, unanimous to close the public hearing. I will take a motion to recommend these to town meeting.
I make a motion to recommend Article 32, is it 32?
31.
31 to town meeting for the
Second.
changes, yeah.
Need a motion, second by Mike. Roll call. Deirdre?
Aye.
Joel?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, unanimous. All right, floodplain. Let me pull up. All right, the floodplain. These are town meeting slides that I'll be using. You got a lot of this background, so I'm not going to go through it. We essentially have to do this. It is basically
I'll go-
recommended.
I make a motion to close it.
I-
You told us all this before.
Some of it, well, because this is a public hearing, we kind of need to at least see the slides.
Can we quickly go through?
These changes are needed because FEMA is requiring them. It includes the map changes in the Merrimack River watershed. The prior map changes were focused on Concord River watershed. DCR Flood Hazard Management Program helped us out. We do have a little bit more restrictive model than the Massachusetts model in our bylaws. The map and legend are also included. And I have included additional links and information for people to preview before town meeting.
Beautiful. Make a motion to close.
Second.
Anita makes a motion to close, Mike second, and roll call. Deirdre?
Aye.
Joel?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Close the public hearing is unanimous. And I will take a motion to recommend these changes to town meeting.
I make a motion to recommend Article 28.
32.
32. What's why I say 28 up there? Okay, 32.
Motion by Anita, second by Mike. Roll call. Deirdre?
Aye.
Joel?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, unanimous.
Okay.
All right.
Told you those would be quick. All right, next we have the 129 overlay. Paul?
It's a late, long day for you.
Good evening, Paul Cohen, Town Manager. Again, I'll be quick, recognizing the hour and the fact that I was here at your last meeting. We've almost sort of come full circle tonight in terms of talking about individual properties and so forth. And so what's being proposed here, I'm bringing forward, based on my 9 years of having seen the existing zoning revisions out in the 129 corridor, part of which were driven by the desire and need and request for those out in the corridor to have amenities. And since that time, the only amenities that have gone out there have been at Press Cafe, with the drive-through. What I'm proposing here is to amend our our casual restaurants overlay portion of the bylaw to change it to allow from upscale to fast casual, and basically to fill the remaining two drive-through components that are allowed under the bylaw. And you can see the change in terms of allowing them to be freestanding, in smaller in size and smaller in seating. And really what this is about is, I think, to enhance the 129 corridor, as well as to take advantage of what really is a unique parcel site that I've sort of watched over the years. We're talking about 285 Mill Road, as shown on the map. It is bound by, if you go to the next slide, it is bound by the Route 3 Cloverleaf there in the center, as you know. Basically, there's no residential impact. It literally has roadway on four sides of the parcel, primarily the on-ramps to Route 3, Billerica Road, and then Mill Road. And was most recently occupied by Lighthouse School, and prior to that by Lifelinks. And now basically there's an issue of tenancy, and the property owner reached out to the town, and from the information they're receiving, in terms of difficulty in re-tenanting the place, that the market for that property, because of its location, the fact that it's at the highway interchange, there is a traffic signal that goes in at Mill Road, is for basically fast casual. The component, if you look at the next slide, you'll see sort of an illustration of how that would be. The building would be torn down, and you see an illustration that was provided by the property owner of two fast casual going through on that parcel. Two standalone fast casual with their own separate entrances, their own parking, and basically, the way in and get out. What this would really mean is 90+% of your traffic flow would come from the highway, and it would go back to the highway. And then the other balance, it primarily would come from Billerica Road on that area. But for this parcel, I wouldn't be here, because I think it is a unique parcel, and I think it will fulfill an amenity need that's out there in the corridor. Right now, it's only Press Cafe. We've seen 9 years only Press Cafe, and despite the phenomenal success by Press Cafe, no one else is coming. No one else has come. And I don't think there's a reasonable expectation that anybody else is going to come. So we're left with two options. And this is what I'm asking the town meeting, and for you to consider and for the town meeting to decide, is we can do nothing, and there's no indication anything will change in terms of amenities out there, or we can change the zoning. This building will be raised, on that site, and a new fast casual drive-throughs will be installed. They will hit our quota, and it will provide amenities out there beyond Press Cafe. Although, notably, on the edge of the corridor, adjacent to Press Cafe, And therefore, I don't think it diminishes from the 129 business corridor. I think it's basically, it's your edge of your corridor. And basically, much like Press Cafe, you're going to draw from not only the corridor, but you're going to draw significantly from the highway. And yes, we have fast casual up in Drum Hill. I think the difference is this is on the other side of the little connector. And so if you're on this side of the little connector and going down towards Burlington, this will draw and this will meet that need. I also did speak to a major employer out there because, as you know, we're keeping a close eye on a major employer having to do with manufacturing out there, which I don't want to get into a name, but you can figure out who that is since we've been at town meeting recently about a concern of manufacturing out there. And I asked the property owner representative, company representative out there, I said, what's your reaction if we were to offer, an upscale, fast casual coffee shop and a place where somebody could get a hamburger for their employees, because the property owners request that we not identify franchises. And his reaction is, yeah, our employees would love the idea to be able to go grab a coffee or grab a bite to eat in addition to what we have out there at Press Cafe. So that's what it comes down to. And if you go to the last slide, the last photo is, this will provide the planning board with the permitting control. So much like you did with the CVS years ago in the center, in terms of the exterior appearance, you can do that here. And that's what a lot of these changes are, is allowing you to control the appearance of what would get built out there by your permitting process. In terms of how it looks aesthetically, does it fit? And I just think, at the end of the day, I just think it's something that we can add, that I think, and I use the word add to the corridor, that I don't think will diminish the corridor, and I think will provide, in my mind, part of the vision that we had years ago in terms of amenities out there. So that's my presentation, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Questions first?
And this is a question for Evan. The current Bayard, that extends from,
I have a map.
thank you.
So the Bayard covers the entirety of the 129 area. However, the fast casual is only applicable to Mill Road and Billerica Road.
Portion of Mill Road.
Correct. Not including the exclusion zone along Mill Road, which is in yellow.
So the Billerica Road all the way up, not the entire stretch, but I assume, but between town line with Billerica and to Golden Cove? Middlesex Turnpike?
It does, it goes from the, yes, from the Billerica town line to this portion of.
Is there a way to word this such that it's restricted to Alpha Road from Billerica Road
Well,
up to
as Paul
Alpha
indicated, the current bylaw caps it at 3. And so there's already one out there. This would be the second and third.
Yeah, but this is zoning, not a site plan review, so we're talking about allowing 2 freestanding fast food restaurants anywhere along the entire stretch of Billerica Road. So I think our zoning decision has to be based on the zoning, not the project, right? So I would want to know, could we restrict it such that it's to Alpha Road? That this particular, these particular changes are related to what we're going to allow on Billerica Road up to Alpha Road. And the reason I specify Alpha Road is because it's 2 lanes up to Alpha Road. It's 1 lane past Alpha Road.
Why can't you just do Mill Road? To Mill Road.
You certainly could do that. The original intent of extending it along the entirety of Billerica Road was that there were sites identified across from Apollo Drive where there was actually a permitted project. Wasn't for freestanding fast casual, but it was for a full-service restaurant.
Right.
And then there are a variety of existing single-family homes in that same general location. However, as I indicated, for purposes of what's being discussed here, if town meeting approves it and the planning board approves a project, we've met our quota. The bylaw caps
Right, that's
us
assuming, though,
at 3.
this
I
developer-
understand that, but what we're doing is, for town meeting, is we're approving the zoning. So I want to know, can we word this in such a way that it restricts how much of Billerica Road this zoning applies to in the Bay Area?
Yep.
Because that
So-
would be the only way I would vote for it.
Article 29, I'm sorry, 28, subsection A, you could amend that.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you just leave it the way it is? It restricts it right to.
Yeah,
one
what are you
road.
driving at, Joel?
It holds.
Well, it's Billerica Road. It's Billerica Road.
I think it's the intersection. You should just say
So-
the intersection of that.
Now, I'm willing to go up to Alpha Drive, but right now, the way I understand it, and the way it's mapped.
looks like it's the whole
way it's
road.
mapped, it's the entire
It
stretch of
is.
Billerica Road from Billerica Town Line to
Right, that was the original.
Golden Cove / Turnpike. And I don't think that we should be zoning that entire thing for freestanding fast food. Because we're not spot zoning.
Right, can we go
I
back?
agree.
Can we go back to,
Point.
but I would be fine, go back,
Yeah.
no, to that, we were
Yep,
taking
that's
out. Because there are restaurants that would be freestanding and would actually, like, not be bad, like, across from,
This is for fast casual.
fast
well, that's what I'm saying, because we're saying this is because we're changing, we're changing the word upscale to fast, right? And that's where I have an issue with it. And we're getting rid of G, must provide reusable dinnerware for the interior site.
I see your point.
So I'd rather have a nice restaurant all the way down, right, in those houses.
Right.
It's freestanding.
Right. All I'm asking
Currently
for.
can do and will continue to be
No,
able to
because we
do.
have, right now it has to be, doesn't it have to be
No,
adjacent?
under section 195, 145B, restaurants, freestanding full-service restaurants are permitted.
Okay, they are, okay, then never mind, okay, then I was.
This is only specific to drive-through.
So we would be capped out of the drive-through, but additional restaurants would be okay,
Correct.
upscale.
Traditional
Okay.
sit-down, full-service restaurants are currently allowed and will continue to be allowed, and they can locate anywhere. They don't have to be along the main lines.
Okay,
And what if they wanted to have, what if they were a full-scale restaurant, but they wanted to have a drive-through? They could petition that, or no?
No,
Then we're only allowed 3.
Okay,
no.
That's fine.
Full-service restaurants are not allowed to have drive-throughs.
And years down the road, could that be amended at town meeting?
could
after
be
the
if
town-
needed.
right, so we're turning this into, like, that's my,
All right, before we go into too many comments, any other questions? I'm going to quickly shift the discussion to any public comments.
there's no one here.
Okay, now,
No.
Like giving the
They're
evil
they're
eye.
sitting there, they said no.
all right, no public comments. So any comments internal to the board?
We have to close the public hearing?
I have
Not yet.
Okay.
a comment. I generally am predisposed to oppose this because I'm not a fan of having fast casual there and kind of locking ourselves out of something more upscale. And I feel like there'd be more of a incentive maybe for the brokers to help us if they didn't know they could kind of maneuver us into taking a chain. However, it's been however many years, I think Paul just said 9. It's probably been more than that. And it seems that no additional amenities have come or are coming. And I have been on the other end of this situation where something that I thought should be brought to town meeting. An intervening board prohibited, like, didn't let it go to town meeting. And I feel like out of respect for the town manager and his efforts to have a long scale vision for the town and what's best for the town's interests, I think I'm going to support this, and mostly support that it comes to town meeting for a decision. It's not really, I mean, we're not gonna decide anyway. We're just gonna decide to support it or not, but I'm gonna support it.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments?
I think I'm going to support this.
Yeah.
I think we've been waiting for something down there. It hasn't been happening. And I like the idea of where it's so close located. And I think right after Drum Hill, if you come down, there's nothing to right off the highway until you get all the way to Burlington. So I think this may be something that could spark what we need for 129.
There's nothing on Route 3, there's nothing at Concord.
No, and if you have to go inland into Bill Ricker and then into Bedford to get to
Crazy.
a good coffee shop or a good burger place. But I know where they are.
Last good place down there was the old Maples.
All right, any other comments?
Yeah, I'd just say that I would support the concept with the suggestion that Joel made, because my concern is I think this is an ideal location right next to the exit ramp or the on-ramp for the Route 3. However, should an investor back out, hopefully they won't, I would not want to see it go way down 129 at another parcel.
My perspective is traditionally zoning amendments should be developed and put forward by the planning board. But I think in this case, because of the conditions for the market, I agree with the town manager bringing it forward. But I also see how this overlay was initially developed. It was developed with a pretty wide community committee. So I'm actually going to abstain as a planning board member from this vote, because I don't feel it's the planning board's decision one way or the other. I would like to see it go to town meeting, and I'll be debating as a town meeting rep as part of that process, but I think that's where this zoning amendment should be debated because of the way it was initially created. So, but I do agree that if it does go before town meeting, it should be restricted, as Joel mentioned.
I'll do that. I'll put that in the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
I want you to know that I will, when the motion comes, it will say from Alpha Road to the Burke line.
All right.
Excellent. For those of you who are still listening at home and didn't hear that, the town manager will amend this to say Alpha Road to the Bill Ricker line.
In that case, I'm in favor. I agree with Mike.
Thank you.
All right. So I think we're at a point where I will accept a motion to close the public hearing.
I will move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Anita. Roll call. Deirdre.
To close the public hearing.
Aye.
Joel.
Aye.
This is to
Mike?
close the public hearing.
Close public hearing. Mike is an aye. Anita?
Aye.
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 Unanimous. All right. Next, I will take a motion to recommend this.
I make a motion to recommend Article 28.
For
As
town-
amended.
As amended.
I'll second.
Motion by Anita, second by Mike. Roll call. Deirdre?
Aye.
Not yet. Joel?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Anita?
Come back to me.
John?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye. Go back to her.
Anita?
Just do it.
It's tough.
Well, while you're thinking, I am abstaining.
Oh,
Anita? You're the one that wanted to get out of here.
no, but I really.
That ship sailed.
You've had plenty of time to think.
All right, I'll abstain instead of saying no. I'll abstain.
All right, 2 abstentions, the rest are support. All right, thank you. So that takes care of all of our zoning amendments.
Okay.
So, next item, liaison updates.
Well, my husband asked me to see if we're having an appointment for Central Village. And I didn't really remember when he asked me. I think that we decided Anita was gonna go until the election, which is probably one more meeting, is that right?
But the problem is I've got the FinCom that is running on Thursday nights, which conflicts, which ran into the problem last meeting. So if they need to take a vote, like I can't make that. And we'll run all of in March. So that's my problem. So
But don't they meet earlier?
They meet at 6.
we meet at 6. And FinCom starts at 6:30. Last couple ones, they've started at 6:30. So that's been the problem. So I'm fine to stay on till April. Actually, after April is when FinCom stops and I can actually go. But we said, Marcy, we would appoint Marcy in this, at least for the next meeting.
Yeah, why don't we, are you okay with going for the next, until the election?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so Marcy will go in your place, Deirdre?
We have to
Or,
take a vote.
It wasn't me, it was Anita.
Oh, that's right, in your place, okay.
So do we have to make a motion for this? Or do we just?
Yes,
I make a motion that we appoint Marcy for the Center Village liaison.
motion by Anita, second by John,
3 seconds.
and roll call, Deirdre,
Aye.
Joel.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Anita.
Aye.
John. Mike. And I'm an aye. The grant submission stuff, can that wait till next meeting? Or is that time sensitive?
That is due, it's due on the 26th. So yes, it can wait till the 12th.
All right, that will be next meeting. Minutes? Oh, I did have one liaison update from Concom that, in addition to the Palet approval, they did mention that the demolition has started at 270 Billerica Road.
Oh, yeah.
It's
kind of
all
well
above
noticed
ground so
that.
far.
Anyone who drives the roads.
They've demobilized the crew for about a month, but when they are back, they're going to start the foundation and below ground. Beta will have a site monitor on site. They are authorized to stop work if anything is not according to the RAM plan. And so they'll correct things and contact Concom. After the foundation work is done, they'll continue site prep, and Beta will continue to be the site monitor on that project.
Great.
All right, meeting minutes. Did people review the meeting minutes?
Yes.
I did. You know what? I had an update from Housing Advisory. I'll try and make it quick, but we had a presentation from Mike Osceola from NEMCOG. He's putting together, our NEMCOG is working on a housing production plan. Everyone will be thrilled to hear. Trying to find out the regional needs for the NEMCOG circle of communities, and he's specifically working on ours, and he kind of presented an outline. There's going to be a full launch of the plan sometime, I think, in May. But the outline was basically bullet points. They want to increase affordable housing, diversify housing options, preserve and improve the existing stock, address vulnerable population needs. And it generated into a discussion of that we would like any housing development or production plan in Chelmsford to focus actually on the missing middle. And so we kind of threw some ideas around. I don't know if anyone, I don't really want to go into much more than that at the moment, because it kind of was a long conversation and it's rather late. But you know, for a town that is built out and lacks infrastructure, but yet still has housing needs, like, what do we want to focus on, and how do we want to focus on that, I guess, are topics for thought.
Can we put that on the next agenda?
Yeah.
All right.
I just want to, just kind of real quickly, just point out, I sent it to you, there was, Haley, is on the rampage about getting more housing. So one of the things is she was looking at strengthening chapter 40B.
Okay, can we discuss this next meeting?
Well, I just want to bring this onto the highlight
Okay.
for everybody. Okay.
Can you send it an email?
All right, I'll send it to all you guys. Good read. You may want to think about what other things may be
What other surprises?
forced mandates we're going to have to deal with.
Because I'd rather not start on this topic because it'll get me going about how we lack infrastructure and no help from the state to support that
Oh, I know.
infrastructure.
Okay, I'm just saying that, there's something out there, you guys.
Okay. January 22nd meeting minutes, Evan, the votes are still off.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
let's
went
move
back
that.
and looked at the video. I was there, and I did vote.
The Dunstable vote, 65 vote was 7-0, and Joel's name should be added. And the Fort Palet vote was 7-0, and my name should be added.
Okay.
Other than that, any other edits to the meeting minutes on the 22nd of January? I'll take a motion to approve those meeting minutes.
Motion to approve as corrected?
John made the motion.
Second that.
Joel seconds. Roll call. Deirdre.
You sleep.
Aye.
Joel.
Aye.
Mike.
She's
Anita.
Aye.
I'm an aye. John.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
All ayes. All right. February 12th.
Make a motion to approve February
Second.
12th.
Motion by Anita, second by Mike. Roll call. Deirdre.
Aye.
Joel.
Aye.
Mike is an aye. Anita.
Aye.
I'm an aye.
Aye.
John and Mike, all of ayes. I will take a next motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Mike, second by Anita.
Aye. Unanimous.
Deirdre.
Aye.
Joel.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Anita.
Aye.
John. Mike.
Aye.
Aye.
Jason, aye.
Thank you, everyone.
I'll copy an email.